Every Sunday for the past 2 years, I have visited my wife's grave. Rain or shine, summer or winter, I make the drive to Greenwood Memorial Cemetery in Portland, kneel before the cold granite stone, and tell Eleanor about my week. She never answers, of course. But somehow, talking to her makes the silence of our empty Victorian home a little more bearable. On the morning of my 70th birthday, I woke before dawn. The October air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wet earth. I dressed slowly, my joints protesting as they always do these days, and drove through streets, still quiet with sleep. The cemetery gates were open, as they always are. I parked in my usual spot beneath the old oak tree and walked the familiar path to Eleanor's resting place. I brought her favorite flowers. White roses, 7 of them, 1 for each decade of my life. I placed them carefully against the headstone and lowered myself to my knees, ignoring the damp grass soaking through my trousers. 70 years old today, my love, I said softly. Can you believe it? I certainly cannot. Some mornings I still expect to hear you humming in the kitchen, smell your coffee brewing. 43 years of marriage, and I still reach for you in the middle of the night. I paused, swallowing the familiar ache in my throat. Melissa would have been 38 this year. Do you remember how she used to make me breakfast in bed on my birthday? Burned toast and orange juice with too much pulp? I pretended to love it every single time. A gust of wind stirred the leaves around me. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me. My daughter, my only child. Gone 8 years now, taken by a car accident on a rainy night in Seattle. They told me she died on impact. They told me she did not suffer. Small mercies, I suppose, though they never made the grief any smaller. I miss you both so much, I whispered. This house is too big for one old man. Too many empty rooms. Too many photographs on the walls. I was wiping my eyes when I heard it. Mister, why are you crying? The voice was small and clear, like a bell. I turned, startled, and found myself face to face with a little girl. She could not have been more than 7 years old. She wore a blue dress with white flowers, her dark hair pulled back in 2 neat braids. In her hands, she clutched a single yellow daisy, but it was her eyes that made my heart stop. Green, bright, vivid green, with tiny flecks of gold around the pupils. I knew those eyes. I had looked into them every day for 30 years. They were my daughter's eyes. I asked why you are crying, the girl repeated, tilting her head. Did somebody you love die too? I could not speak. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I simply stared at this child who looked at me with my dead daughter's gaze. My mommy is buried here, she continued, pointing somewhere behind me. Grandma Grace brings me every Sunday to put flowers on her grave. Mommy liked daisies. Your mommy? I finally managed. The girl nodded solemnly. She went to heaven when I was a baby. I do not remember her face, but Grandma Grace says I have her eyes. She smiled then, a shy, sweet smile that pierced my chest like a knife. You look sad, mister. Like my grandpa in the photographs. Grandma says I would have loved him very much. She paused, studying my face with an intensity far beyond her years. You remind me of him. Actually, are you somebody's grandpa? The question hit me like a physical blow. Grandpa. The word I never got to hear. The role I never got to play. No, I said, my voice cracking. No, I am not. The little girl frowned, as if this answer disappointed her deeply. Then she did something that changed everything. She reached out and placed her small hand over mine. That is very sad, she said. Everyone should have a grandpa. Before I could respond, an older woman's voice called out from across the cemetery. Sophie, Sophie, where are you? The little girl pulled her hand away and turned toward the voice. Over here, Grandma Grace! I made a new friend! A woman appeared from behind a row of headstones, walking briskly toward us. She was perhaps 45, with kind eyes and silver streaks running through her black hair. She wore a simple gray coat and carried a bouquet of yellow daisies identical to the one Sophie held. "Sophie, how many times have I told you not to wander off?" The woman stopped short when she saw me, still kneeling on the damp grass. Her expression shifted from concern to curiosity. "I hope she was not bothering you." "No," I said, struggling to stand. My knees protested loudly. "No, not at all. She was just keeping me company." The woman extended her hand to help me up. Her grip was warm and surprisingly strong. "I am Grace Chen, and I see you have already met my granddaughter, Sophie." "Richard Bennett," I replied automatically, though my mind was elsewhere. I could not stop looking at the child. Those eyes, that face, the resemblance was impossible, and yet undeniable. "It is his birthday today, Grandma," Sophie announced. "He is 70 years old. That is very, very old." "Sophie!" Grace's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "That is not polite." But I laughed. A genuine sound that surprised even me. She is not wrong. 70 does feel very, very old most days. Sophie beamed at me, clearly pleased to have made me laugh. Then she tugged on her grandmother's sleeve. "Can we show him Mommy's grave?" He was sad, so I think he understands about missing people. Grace hesitated, glancing at me with an unreadable expression. "I am sure Mr. Bennett has his own visits to make, sweetheart. Actually," I heard myself say, "I would be honored, if you do not mind." Something flickered in Grace's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition of a fellow griever. She nodded slowly and took Sophie's hand. "It is just over here." Not far. I followed them through the winding paths of Greenwood Memorial, past rows of granite and marble, past faded flowers and weathered American flags. The morning sun had begun to break through the clouds, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. We stopped before a modest headstone, newer than most around it. The granite was still dark and polished, untouched by years of rain and wind. I read the inscription, and my blood turned to ice. Asterisk. Asterisk. Catherine Moore. Asterisk. Asterisk. Itenjobai bashaleo thou lantenling ishaleo. Asterisk asterisk. Beloved mother, asterisk asterisk. Asterisk asterisk, forever in our hearts. Asterisk. Asterisk. 1986. The year my Melissa was born. 2016. The year my Melissa died. The math screamed at me. Catherine Moore had been born the same year as my daughter. She had died the same year as my daughter. She had been 30 years old, exactly like my daughter. She was so young, I whispered, barely able to form the words. Grace nodded, her eyes fixed on the headstone. Too young. She passed away 8 years ago, when Sophie was just a baby. Car accident. They told me she did not suffer. The words echoed in my skull. Car accident. Did not suffer. The same phrases the police had used when they came to my door that terrible night in November. Sophie knelt down and placed her daisy against the stone. Hi, Mommy. I brought you a flower. Yellow. Like sunshine. Grandma says you loved sunshine. I watched the child, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my temples. Her profile, the curve of her nose, the way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, every gesture, every movement, was a ghost of my daughter. Mr. Bennett? Grace's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. Are you all right? You have gone very pale. I opened my mouth to lie, to say I was fine, just tired, just overwhelmed by the emotion of the day. But my eyes drifted back to the headstone, and I noticed something I had missed before. A photograph. Small, oval, set into the granite. The woman in the picture had dark hair and green eyes. She was smiling, a familiar smile that I had seen 1,000 times across the breakfast table, at birthday parties, At her college graduation, she was my daughter. Catherine Moore was my daughter. But that was impossible. My daughter was Melissa Bennett, and she was buried in a cemetery in Seattle, 200 miles away. I had stood at her funeral. I had watched them lower her casket into the ground. I had thrown the first handful of dirt onto the polished wood. My daughter was dead, and yet here she was, staring at me from a stranger's grave, under a name I had never heard. Mr. Bennett? The world tilted. Gray spots danced at the edges of my vision. I reached out blindly, grabbing the nearest headstone for support. "Something is wrong," I gasped. "Something is very, very wrong." I do not remember driving home. One moment I was standing in Greenwood Memorial, gripping a stranger's headstone while the world spun around me. The next, I was sitting in my car in the driveway of my Victorian home in Eastmoreland, engine still running, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Grace Chen had offered to call an ambulance. I had refused. Sophie had looked at me with those impossible green eyes, worried and confused. And I had mumbled something about low blood sugar, about forgetting to eat breakfast, about being a foolish old man who should know better. Grace had not believed me. I could see it in her face. But she had let me go, pressing a business card into my palm before I stumbled away. "Call me if you need anything," she had said. "Sometimes it helps to talk to someone who understands loss." The card sat on my passenger seat now, white against the dark leather. Grace Chen, social worker, Portland Family Services, a phone number, an email address, nothing else. I turned off the engine and sat in the silence. The house loomed before me. 3 stories of weathered brick and white trim, built in 1922 by a timber baron, whose name I could never remember. Eleanor and I had bought it 35 years ago, when Melissa was just 3 years old. We had filled it with laughter and Christmas trees and the sound of small feet running up and down the stairs. We had raised our daughter within these walls, watched her grow from a gap-toothed toddler into a beautiful, troubled woman. Now the house was quiet. Had been quiet for years. I forced myself to go inside. The foyer smelled of dust and old wood, and the lavender sachets Eleanor used to place in every drawer. I hung my coat on the rack by the door, the same rack where Melissa's little red jacket had once hung, and walked slowly into the living room. Photographs covered every surface. Eleanor and I on our wedding day, young and hopeful, and completely unaware of the sorrows to come. Melissa at 5, missing her front teeth, grinning at the camera. Melissa at 16, sullen and beautiful, already pulling away from us. Melissa at 22, graduating from nursing school, the last truly happy photograph we ever took of her. I picked up that frame and studied my daughter's face. Green eyes, dark hair. That particular curve of the jaw, the slight upturn of the nose. The same features I had seen this morning, frozen in granite, beneath a name that was not hers. "What did you do?" "Melissa," I whispered to the photograph. "What did you do?" The memories came then, unbidden and unwelcome. 8 years ago, a Tuesday evening in November, I had been sitting in this very room, reading the newspaper, when the doorbell rang. 2 police officers stood on my porch, their faces carefully blank. They asked if I was Richard Bennett. They asked if I had a daughter named Melissa Bennett. They told me there had been an accident, a rainy night on Interstate 5, just north of Seattle. A semi-truck had jackknifed across 3 lanes. Melissa's car had been crushed. The paramedics had pronounced her dead at the scene. Eleanor had collapsed when I told her. I had caught her before she hit the floor, held her while she screamed, and felt something inside my chest shatter into pieces too small to ever reassemble. The funeral had been 3 days later. Closed casket, the mortician had said. The damage was too severe. I had not argued. I could not bear the thought of seeing my daughter's broken body. It was easier to remember her as she had been, alive and difficult and loved. We buried her in a cemetery outside Seattle, near the apartment she had rented after she stopped speaking to us. I had paid for the headstone myself. Melissa Ann Bennett, beloved daughter, 1986 to 2016. Gone too soon. I had visited that grave exactly once, on the first anniversary of her death. The grass had grown over the disturbed earth, green and thick and final. I had stood there for an hour, unable to speak, unable to cry, unable to do anything but stare at the granite proof that my only child was gone. Eleanor died 18 months later. Heart attack, the doctors said, but I knew better. She died of grief. She died because living without Melissa was a weight too heavy to carry. And now, on my 70th birthday, a little girl with my daughter's eyes had called me Grandpa, and a headstone in Portland bore my daughter's photograph beneath another woman's name. I set the picture frame down and walked to my study. The room was exactly as Eleanor had left it, cluttered with books and papers and the remnants of her genealogy hobby. She had spent her final months researching our family history, tracing the Bennett line back to England, the Chen line back to Guangdong. I had never had the heart to clean it out. I sat down at her desk, opened my laptop, and typed 2 words into the search engine. Catherine Moore. The screen filled with results. None of them meant anything. A professor in Ohio, a real estate agent in Florida, a teenager's Instagram account. No obituaries, no news articles, no trace of the woman buried in Greenwood Memorial Cemetery. It was as if Catherine Moore had never existed at all. I searched for 3 hours. My coffee grew cold beside the keyboard. The afternoon light shifted across the study walls, casting long shadows over Eleanor's stacks of genealogy books. Outside, the October wind rattled the windows, but I barely noticed. I was lost in a maze of browser tabs and dead ends. Catherine Moore, Portland, Oregon. Died 2016. Nothing. I tried every combination I could think of. Catherine Moore obituary. Catherine Moore car accident. Catherine Moore, Greenwood Memorial Cemetery. Each search returned the same frustrating results. Professors, real estate agents, high school athletes. None of them were the woman in that photograph. I switched tactics. I searched for car accidents in Portland during 2016. Hundreds of results appeared, but none mentioned a Catherine Moore. I searched for car accidents in Seattle, in Tacoma, in every city along the Interstate 5 corridor. Still nothing. It was as if the woman buried in that grave had lived and died without leaving a single trace in the digital world. My hands were shaking when I finally pushed back from the desk. Think, Richard, I muttered to myself. Think like the businessman you used to be. For 40 years, I had run Bennett Construction Group, building it from a 2-man operation into one of Portland's most respected commercial contractors. I had negotiated million-dollar deals, navigated Byzantine permit processes, and solved problems that lesser men would have abandoned. Surely I could unravel the mystery of one woman's grave. I pulled a legal pad from Eleanor's drawer and began making notes. Facts. Start with the facts. 1. Catherine Moore was buried in Greenwood Memorial Cemetery in Portland. 2. Her headstone listed her birth year as 1986 and her death year as 2016. 3. The photograph on her headstone was identical to my daughter Melissa. 4. Sophie, who claimed to be Catherine's daughter, had Melissa's eyes. 5. Grace, Chen was Sophie's guardian and referred to Catherine as Sophie's mother. 6. No public records of Catherine Moore appeared to exist. I stared at the list, my pen hovering over the paper. The logical explanation was coincidence. People looked alike sometimes. Doppelgangers existed. Perhaps Catherine Moore simply resembled my daughter by random chance, and my grief-addled mind was seeing connections that were not there. But logic could not explain Sophie's eyes. Those eyes were not merely similar to Melissa's. They were identical. The same shade of green, the same gold flecks, the same slightly upturned corners. I had looked into those eyes for 30 years, I would recognize them anywhere. I needed more information. I needed proof. The business card Grace Chen had given me sat on the corner of the desk. I picked it up and turned it over in my fingers. Social worker, Portland Family Services, she would have access to records, birth certificates, adoption papers, the documentation that would prove whether Sophie was truly Catherine Moore's daughter or whether something far stranger was happening. But I could not simply call her and demand answers. She would think I was insane. A grieving old man, desperate to believe his dead daughter was somehow still alive. Perhaps I was insane. Perhaps the loneliness had finally cracked something inside my brain. I set the card down and opened a new browser tab. Private investigators. Portland, Oregon. The search returned dozens of results. I scrolled through them slowly, reading reviews and testimonials, looking for someone who specialized in missing persons cases. Most of them seemed focused on cheating spouses and insurance fraud. Not what I needed. Then one name caught my attention. Marcus Webb. Webb Investigations, 25 years experience, former FBI, specializing in cold cases, missing persons, and identity verification. Identity verification. The words jumped off the screen. I clicked on the website. A photograph showed a black man in his late 50s, gray at the temples, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. His biography listed an impressive resume. 15 years with the FBI's Portland field office, specializing in kidnapping and missing children cases. 10 years in private practice, with a 92% success rate in locating missing persons. At the bottom of the page, a simple contact form. Name, email, brief description of your case. I hesitated, my fingers poised over the keyboard. What would I even say? I think my daughter faked her death 8 years ago. I think she had a child I never knew about. I think she is buried in Portland under a false name, even though I attended her funeral in Seattle. It sounded insane. It was insane, but Sophie's eyes haunted me. That little girl had looked at me with my daughter's gaze, and something deep in my bones had recognized her. Something beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond the careful skepticism I had cultivated over 70 years of life. I typed my name into the form, my email address, and then, in the description box, I wrote 3 sentences. I believe my daughter may have faked her death 8 years ago. I have found a grave in Portland with her photograph, but a different name. I need someone to help me discover the truth. My finger hovered over the submit button. If I clicked it, there was no going back. I would be committing myself to an investigation that might destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. I might discover that my daughter had lied to me, had abandoned me, had lived a secret life while I mourned her in an empty house. Or I might discover that I was a foolish old man, chasing ghosts that did not exist. Either way, the truth would change me. I clicked the button. Marcus Webb called me the next morning. I had not slept. The hours between midnight and dawn had passed in a blur of pacing and staring at the ceiling and replaying every interaction I had ever had with my daughter. Had there been signs, warnings that she was capable of such elaborate deception? I searched my memories like a man sifting through wreckage, looking for clues I might have missed. The phone rang at 8:15. I grabbed it on the first ring. Mr. Bennett? This is Marcus Webb from Webb Investigations. I received your inquiry last night. His voice was deep and measured, the kind of voice that inspired confidence. I imagined him sitting in a cluttered office somewhere, surrounded by case files and coffee cups, already sizing me up based on those 3 desperate sentences I had typed. Thank you for calling, I said. I know, my message must have seemed strange. I have seen stranger. Believe me. A pause. But your case does interest me. You mentioned a grave with your daughter's photograph, but a different name. Can you tell me more? I told him everything. The cemetery visit, Sophie and her impossible eyes, the headstone for Catherine Moore, the complete absence of any public records. I spoke for 15 minutes without interruption. the words pouring out of me like water from a broken dam. When I finished, the line was silent for a long moment. "Mr. Bennett," Marcus finally said, "I am going to ask you a difficult question, and I need you to answer honestly. Is there any possibility that you are mistaken about the photograph? Grief can play tricks on the mind. After 8 years, memories can shift and change. I understand why you would ask that," I replied. "But no, I am not mistaken. That photograph was my daughter. I would stake my life on it." Another pause. "Then we need to meet. Today, if possible. Can you come to my office?" I wrote down the address. A small building in the Pearl District, not far from where Eleanor and I used to browse the art galleries on lazy Sunday afternoons. I told him I would be there in an hour. The drive through Portland felt surreal, as if I were moving through a dream. The city I had lived in for 40 years suddenly seemed unfamiliar, its streets and buildings belonging to someone else's life. I parked in a garage off 10th Avenue and walked 2 blocks to a narrow brick building wedged between a coffee shop and a bookstore. Web Investigations occupied the 3rd floor. I climbed the stairs slowly, my knees protesting each step, and found a frosted glass door with the company name stenciled in black letters. I knocked once and entered. The office was smaller than I had expected, but meticulously organized. Filing cabinets lined one wall. A large desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with neat stacks of folders, and behind the desk sat Marcus Webb, looking exactly like his photograph, except older and more tired. He stood when I entered and extended his hand. His grip was firm, but not aggressive. "Mr. Bennett, please, sit down." I lowered myself into the leather chair across from his desk. He studied me for a moment, his dark eyes missing nothing. "You look like a man who has not slept in days," he observed. "Just one night." Though it felt like 100. He nodded, as if this were exactly what he expected. Then he opened a folder on his desk and slid a photograph across to me. "Is this the woman you saw on the headstone?" I looked down. My heart stopped. It was Melissa. Not a photograph from the grave, but a different image entirely. She was younger here, perhaps 25, standing in front of a building I did not recognize. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut in a stylish bob, but her face was unmistakable. "Where did you get this?" I whispered. "I did some preliminary research last night, after I received your message." This photograph was attached to a nursing license application in the state of Washington. The name on the application was Catherine Elizabeth Moore. I stared at him. "Nursing license? Registered nurse. Licensed in 2012, 4 years before her supposed death. The address listed was in Seattle." My mind reeled. Melissa had been a nurse. She had graduated from nursing school in 2010, 2 years before this license was issued. Had she been living a double life even then, working under a false name while still maintaining contact with Eleanor and me? "There is more," Marcus continued. He pulled another document from the folder. Catherine Moore's nursing license was suspended in 2015, 1 year before her death. The reason listed was failure to appear for a mandatory review hearing. No further details are available without a court order. "Suspended," I repeated. "Why would she need a review hearing?" "That is what I intend to find out." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. "Mr. Bennett, I have been doing this work for a long time. I have seen cases of identity fraud, of faked deaths, of people who disappear and reinvent themselves for 100 different reasons. But I have never seen anything quite like this." "What do you mean?" He folded his hands on the desk. "Your daughter, if she is indeed alive, went to extraordinary lengths to create a second identity. Nursing licenses require extensive documentation, background checks, social security verification. Someone helped her build this false life, and that someone had access to resources most people cannot imagine." I felt cold. "You think she had an accomplice?" "I think she had to. And I think finding that accomplice is the key to understanding what really happened 8 years ago." Marcus spent the next hour walking me through his findings. He had a whiteboard on the wall behind his desk, and he used it now, drawing lines and boxes and arrows, like a professor explaining a complex theorem. I watched in silence, my coffee untouched, as the scope of my daughter's deception slowly revealed itself. "Let us start with what we know for certain," he said, uncapping a black marker. Melissa Ann Bennett was born in Portland, Oregon, in 1986. She graduated from Jefferson High School in 2004, attended Portland State University, and received her nursing degree in 2010. All of this is documented and verified. He wrote these facts in a column on the left side of the board. Catherine Elizabeth Moore appears in the records for the first time in 2011. Washington State driver's license, issued in Seattle. Social Security number that traces back to a woman who died in infancy in 1986 in rural Montana. Classic identity theft technique. Find a deceased person born around the same time. Assume their identity. Build from there. He wrote this in a column on the right side. The nursing license application came in 2012. Catherine Moore listed her education as a nursing degree from a community college in Spokane. I checked with the college this morning. They have no record of anyone named Catherine Moore ever attending their program, so the credentials were forged. I said, completely fabricated. Which means someone inside the Washington State Nursing Board had to be involved. You cannot simply submit false documents and receive a valid license. Someone had to verify those credentials, and someone had to look the other way. I felt sick. How is that possible? Marcus capped the marker and turned to face me. Money, connections, blackmail. Take your pick. In my experience, there is always someone willing to bend the rules for the right price. He returned to his desk and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. Now, here is where things get interesting. You told me your daughter died in a car accident in November 2016. Closed casket funeral. You never saw the body. The mortician said the damage was too severe. I am sure he did. Marcus opened the folder and spread several documents across the desk. I pulled the accident report this morning. Semi-truck jackknife on Interstate 5. Approximately 15 miles north of Seattle. 1 fatality. The victim was identified as Melissa Ann Bennett based on her driver's license found at the scene and dental records provided by her dentist in Portland. Dental records, I repeated. That is definitive. Marcus looked at me with something like pity. Mr. Bennett, you can fake anything if you know the right people. I contacted your daughter's dentist this morning. Dr. Harold Finch, retired 3 years ago, currently living in Arizona. He remembered Melissa well. Said she was a lovely young woman, always punctual, never missed an appointment. And he also remembered receiving a request for her dental records in November 2016, shortly after the accident. The request came from the King County Medical Examiner's office. Standard procedure for victim identification. He sent the records via secure fax. Marcus paused, his expression darkening. Here is the problem. I also spoke with the King County Medical Examiner's office. They have no record of ever requesting Melissa Bennett's dental records. No record of receiving them. No record of using them to identify the accident victim. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of my chair. That is not possible, I said. Someone identified the body. Someone confirmed it was Melissa. Someone did, but it was not the medical examiner. Marcus slid a document across the desk. This is the official identification report from the accident. The victim was identified by dental records. Comparison performed by a private forensic consultant named Dr. Nathan Cole. He was hired by the funeral home that handled your daughter's arrangements. I stared at the name. Dr. Nathan Cole. I had never heard it before. Who hired the funeral home? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. According to their records, the arrangements were made and paid for by Melissa Bennett herself, 3 weeks before the accident. The words hit me like a physical blow. 3 weeks before. She had planned her own funeral, She had hired a consultant to forge dental records. She had orchestrated every detail of her supposed death with the precision of a military operation. She planned this, I whispered. All of it. It appears so. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Mr. Bennett, I have seen a lot of cases in my career. People disappear for many reasons. Debt, abuse, criminal activity, fear. But the level of planning involved here suggests something more. Your daughter did not simply run away. She erased herself completely and built an entirely new life. Why? The question tore from my throat. Why would she do this? That is what we need to find out. And I think the answer lies with Dr. Nathan Cole. Marcus pulled out a final photograph and placed it before me. This is him, 45 years old, licensed forensic odontologist, currently practicing in Seattle. The man in the photograph had a forgettable face. Brown hair, brown eyes, bland features. The kind of person you would pass on the street without a second glance. He helped her fake her death, I said. He forged the dental records. That is my theory. And if I am right, he knows where your daughter is, or at least where she was before she became Catherine Moore. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gray Portland sky. I should warn you, Mr. Bennett. If we pursue this investigation, we may uncover things you do not want to know. Your daughter went to extraordinary lengths to disappear. People do not do that without reason. Are you prepared for what we might find? I thought of Sophie. Those green eyes, that innocent smile. My grandchild. If my suspicions were correct. A little girl who had grown up without knowing her grandfather existed. I have to know, I said. Whatever the truth is, I have to know. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we start with Dr. Nathan Cole. That night, alone in my empty house, I finally allowed myself to remember. I had spent 8 years burying these memories, locking them away in a corner of my mind where they could not hurt me. Now they clawed their way to the surface, raw and painful and impossible to ignore. Melissa had not always been troubled. As a child, she was sunshine itself, bright and curious and endlessly affectionate, always running to greet me when I came home from work, always climbing into my lap to hear bedtime stories. Eleanor used to say that Melissa had been born with enough love for 10 children, and I believed her. Our daughter filled every room she entered with warmth and laughter. The darkness came later. I still remember the exact moment I first noticed something was wrong. Melissa was 15, a sophomore at Jefferson High. She had always been a straight-A student, the kind of girl teachers loved and other parents envied. But that fall, her grades began to slip. She stopped bringing friends home. She spent hours locked in her room, emerging only for meals she barely touched. It is just teenage hormones, Eleanor said. She will grow out of it. But she did not grow out of it. She grew into it. By 16, Melissa was skipping school. By 17, she was staying out until dawn, coming home with bloodshot eyes and trembling hands. I found pills in her jacket pocket once. Small, white tablets I did not recognize. When I confronted her, she screamed at me for invading her privacy and did not speak to me for 2 weeks. We tried everything. Therapy, family counseling, a brief stint at a rehabilitation facility that cost more than my first house. Nothing worked. Melissa was determined to destroy herself, and we were helpless to stop her. She graduated high school by the skin of her teeth, then surprised everyone by enrolling in Portland State University. She moved into a dormitory, made new friends, discovered a passion for nursing. She called home every Sunday, her voice bright and clear, telling us about her classes and her professors and the patients she would someday help. "I want to make a difference, Daddy," she said once. I wept after that phone call, wept with relief and hope and the desperate belief that my daughter had finally found her way. But addiction is a patient enemy. It waits in the shadows, biding its time, knowing that eventually the darkness will return. Melissa graduated nursing school in 2010. She got a job at a hospital in Seattle, moved into a small apartment, and for 2 years, she thrived. We visited her once a month, took her to dinner, listened to her stories about the babies she helped deliver in the maternity ward. She seemed happy. She seemed whole. Then came the argument. It was Christmas of 2014. Melissa had come home for the holidays, and everything seemed perfect until Christmas Eve dinner. I do not remember how it started. Something about money, I think. Melissa had asked for a loan to cover some unexpected expenses. When I asked what the expenses were, she became defensive. "You never trust me," she said, her voice rising. "No matter what I do, no matter how hard I try, you always assume the worst." "I am not assuming anything," I replied. "I am simply asking a question. You are interrogating me, like you always do, like I am still that stupid teenager who cannot be trusted." Eleanor tried to intervene, but Melissa was beyond reason. She stood up from the table, knocking over her wine glass, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You want to know what the money is for, Daddy?" "What kind of mistakes?" I demanded. "What kind of people?" But she would not say. She grabbed her coat and stormed out of the house, and that was the last time I saw her face to face. After that night, our communication became sporadic. A text message here, a brief phone call there. She always had an excuse for why she could not visit. Work was busy. She was tired. Maybe next month. Next month never came. Eleanor blamed me for the rift. She said I had pushed too hard, demanded too much. Perhaps she was right. I have spent 8 years wondering if I could have done something differently, if I had been gentler, if I had simply given her the money without questions. But now, sitting in my study with Marcus Webb's revelations echoing in my skull, I understood something I had never grasped before. The argument had not been about money. It had been about secrets. Melissa had been hiding something so terrible that she would rather fake her own death than let me discover the truth. Something that had driven her to erase herself completely and start over as Catherine Moore. I opened the drawer of Eleanor's desk and pulled out the one item I had never been able to throw away. A letter, handwritten on pale blue stationery, delivered to our house 3 days after Melissa's funeral. I had read it 1,000 times. I could recite every word from memory. "Dear Mom and Dad, I know you are hurting right now, and I am sorry for the pain I have caused. Please know that I loved you both, even when I could not show it. Some mistakes cannot be undone. Some debts cannot be repaid. I hope someday you will understand why I had to go. Please, do not look for me. Please just remember me, as I was before everything went wrong. Your daughter, Melissa." At the time, I had assumed it was a suicide note written before the accident. The ramblings of a troubled mind. Now I understood it was something else entirely. A confession. And a goodbye. The next morning, I did something I had avoided for 2 years. I went into Eleanor's closet. After my wife died, I had sealed this space like a tomb. Her dresses still hung in neat rows. Her shoes still lined the floor. Her jewelry box still sat on the small vanity where she had applied her makeup every morning. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the fabric, a ghost of lavender and rose that made my chest ache. But I was not here for Eleanor's things. I was here for the boxes. In the back corner, behind the winter coats and forgotten luggage, sat 3 cardboard boxes labeled in Eleanor's careful handwriting. Margaret's things. Do not throw away. Margaret Chen had been Eleanor's mother, my mother-in-law. She had lived with us for the last 5 years of her life, after her health began to decline and she could no longer care for herself. She had died just 6 months before Eleanor, her heart giving out on a quiet Tuesday afternoon while she napped in the sunroom. I had loved Margaret. She was a fierce, stubborn woman who had immigrated from Hong Kong in 1962 with nothing but a suitcase and a dream. She had built a successful restaurant, raised 3 children alone after her husband's death, and never once complained about the hardships life had thrown her way. But Margaret had also kept secrets. I remembered now, with painful clarity, the strange conversations she had with Melissa in the months before her death. Whispered exchanges that stopped abruptly whenever I entered the room, meaningful glances across the dinner table. Once, I had walked into the sunroom and found them embracing, both with tears streaming down their faces. "What is wrong?" I had asked. "Nothing," Margaret had replied, wiping her eyes. "Just an old woman, being sentimental." I had believed her. I had wanted to believe her. Now I wondered what I had missed. I dragged the boxes out of the closet and carried them downstairs to the study. They were heavier than I expected, filled with the accumulated possessions of 93 years of living. Photograph albums, old recipes written in Chinese characters, letters from relatives in Hong Kong, most of whom had died decades ago. I searched for 2 hours before I found them. A bundle of envelopes, bound together with a faded red ribbon, hidden at the bottom of the third box beneath a stack of restaurant menus from 1978. The envelopes were addressed to Margaret Chen, but the return address made my blood run cold. Melissa Bennett. Seattle, Washington. The postmarks spanned from 2014 to 2016. The last letter was dated October 15th, 2016. 1 month before Melissa's supposed death. My hands trembled as I untied the ribbon and opened the first envelope. "Dear Grandma," the letter began. "I know I should not be writing to you. I know I promised to stay away, but I need someone to know the truth, and you are the only person I trust." I read on, my heart pounding. "I have done something terrible, something I can never undo. I got involved with people who promised to help me, and instead, they destroyed everything I worked for. Now I owe them more money than I could earn in 10 lifetimes. And they are threatening to hurt the people I love if I do not pay." The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing a nightmare I had never imagined. Melissa had fallen back into addiction during her first year in Seattle. She had borrowed money from loan sharks to feed her habit. When she could not repay, they had forced her to steal drugs from the hospital where she worked. She had been caught, but instead of reporting her to the police, the hospital had offered her a deal: silence in exchange for her resignation. "They let me walk away," Melissa wrote, "but they kept all the evidence. They said if I ever caused trouble, they would destroy me. So I ran. I changed my name. I started over. But the loan sharks found me anyway. They always find me." I set the letter down and stared at the wall. My daughter had been living a nightmare, and I had known nothing. She had been drowning, and I had been too blind to see the water rising around her. The second letter was worse. "Grandma, I am pregnant. I do not know what to do. The father is gone, disappeared the moment I told him. I cannot go to Mom and Dad. They would never understand. They would try to help. And these people would hurt them. I have to protect them, even if it means losing them forever." The third letter was dated 3 months later. "Her name is Sophie. She has my eyes. She is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, and I am terrified I will destroy her the way I destroy everything else. Grandma, I need your help. I cannot raise her alone, but I cannot let anyone know she exists. If they find out I have a daughter, they will use her against me. Please, I am begging you, take her. Keep her safe. Do not tell anyone where she came from." I sat in stunned silence. The letters spread across Eleanor's desk like fragments of a shattered mirror. Margaret had known. My mother-in-law had known everything. She had taken Sophie, hidden her somewhere, protected her from the forces that threatened Melissa's life, and she had never told a soul. The final letter was the shortest. "Grandma, I cannot do this anymore. I have found a way out, but it means saying goodbye forever. I am going to disappear. Everyone will think I am dead. It is the only way to keep Sophie safe, to keep Mom and Dad safe, to finally escape the people who have been hunting me. Please do not grieve for me. I am not dying. I am just becoming someone else. Kiss Sophie for me every night. Tell her that her mother loved her more than anything in the world. Melissa." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. My daughter had not abandoned her child. She had sacrificed everything to protect her. I called Grace Chen that afternoon. My fingers hesitated over the numbers on her business card. How could I explain that I believed Sophie was my granddaughter without sounding like a lunatic? But I had no choice. Grace was the key to understanding how Sophie had ended up in her care, and why Margaret had never told me the truth. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. Grace Chen speaking. Miss Chen, this is Richard Bennett. We met at Greenwood Memorial Cemetery 2 days ago. I was visiting my wife's grave when your granddaughter approached me. A pause. Mr. Bennett. Yes, I remember. You seemed unwell when you left. Are you feeling better? I am, I lied. But I was hoping we could meet. There is something I need to discuss with you, and it is not a conversation I want to have over the phone. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear her weighing the request, deciding whether to trust this strange old man who had nearly collapsed in front of Sophie. May I ask what this is about? I took a deep breath. It is about Sophie, and about a woman named Margaret Chen. The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. How do you know that name? Grace's voice had changed, sharpening with suspicion. Margaret was my mother-in-law. She died 2 years ago. I recently discovered some letters she had been hiding. Letters that mentioned Sophie. I heard Grace inhale sharply. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Where would you like to meet? She finally asked. We agreed on a coffee shop in the Alberta Arts District, a quiet place I knew from my years of Sunday walks with Eleanor. I arrived 20 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner, away from the windows and the other customers. When Grace walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone was the calm, composed woman from the cemetery. In her place was someone visibly shaken, her eyes red-rimmed, her movements hurried and nervous. She spotted me immediately and crossed the room in quick strides, sliding into the seat across from mine. Before we begin, she said, I need to know something. Are you here to take Sophie away from me? The question caught me off guard. Take her away? No. I do not even understand how she came to be with you. Grace studied my face, searching for deception. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because some of the tension drained from her shoulders. Margaret Chen was my aunt, she said quietly. My father's older sister. She came to me 8 years ago, with a baby in her arms and a story I could barely believe. I leaned forward. What did she tell you? She told me that the baby belonged to her granddaughter, a young woman who was in terrible trouble. She said the mother could not care for the child, that there were people who wanted to hurt them both, and that Sophie needed to disappear. She begged me to take her, to raise her as my own, to never tell anyone where she came from. Grace's voice cracked. I was 37 years old, single, working as a social worker for the county. I had always wanted children, but never found the right partner. When Aunt Margaret placed that baby in my arms, I fell in love instantly. Sophie became my daughter in every way that mattered. But you knew her mother was still alive, I said. I knew nothing. Grace shook her head firmly. Aunt Margaret refused to give me any details. She said it was safer that way, for everyone. She gave me a birth certificate listing Catherine Moore as the mother, told me to never use any other name, and made me promise to protect Sophie with my life. She pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed at her eyes. I kept that promise. For 8 years, I have raised Sophie as my granddaughter. I told her that her mother died in an accident when she was a baby, because that is what Aunt Margaret told me to say. I created a grave in Greenwood Memorial so Sophie would have somewhere to visit, somewhere to feel connected to the mother she never knew. My mind reeled. The grave is fake? There is no one buried there? The grave is real. The body is not. Grace's voice dropped to a whisper. Aunt Margaret arranged everything. She said Catherine Moore needed to be dead, officially and permanently, so that Sophie could be safe. I did not ask questions. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. Margaret Chen, my quiet, unassuming mother-in-law, had orchestrated an elaborate deception spanning nearly a decade. She had hidden a baby, created a false identity, staged a fake burial, and kept the entire conspiracy secret from everyone, including her own daughter, including me. When did you learn the truth? I asked. About who Sophie's mother really was? Grace reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, yellowed with age. 2 years ago, after Aunt Margaret died, she left me a letter, to be opened only after her death. In it, she finally told me everything. She slid the envelope across the table. I recognized Margaret's handwriting immediately. She told me that Sophie's mother was named Melissa Bennett, that Melissa was her granddaughter through marriage, that you were her father, and Eleanor was her mother. Grace paused, her eyes meeting mine. She told me that if you ever came looking for Sophie, I should give you this letter and tell you the truth. I stared at the envelope, unable to move. I have been waiting 2 years, Grace said softly, waiting for you to find us. Aunt Margaret said you would, eventually. She said you were a stubborn man who never gave up on the people you loved. My vision blurred with tears. She was right. I opened Margaret's letter with trembling hands. The paper was fragile, the ink slightly faded, but her voice came through as clearly as if she were sitting beside me. Dear Richard, she wrote, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have finally discovered the truth I kept hidden for so long. I hope you can forgive an old woman for her deception. Everything I did for love. I read slowly, absorbing each word. Melissa came to me in the spring of 2015, pregnant and terrified. I wanted to tell you and Eleanor. I wanted to bring the whole family together to protect her. But Melissa begged me not to. She said these people were dangerous, that they would hurt anyone who tried to help her. She said the only way to keep everyone safe was to disappear. The letter continued for several pages, detailing Margaret's role in the conspiracy. She had used her savings to help Melissa create the Catherine Moore identity. She had found Grace, her niece, and convinced her to take Sophie. She had arranged the fake grave, the forged documents, the elaborate web of lies that had kept Sophie hidden for 8 years. I know you must be angry, Margaret wrote. I know you must feel betrayed. But please understand that I watched my granddaughter suffer, and I could not stand by and do nothing. Melissa made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but she also loved her daughter more than her own life. She gave up everything to protect Sophie. Do not let that sacrifice be in vain. The final paragraph made my heart stop. There is one more thing you must know. Melissa did not die in that car accident. The death was staged, just like everything else. I do not know where she is now. She cut off contact after the funeral, said it was too dangerous to stay in touch. But I believe she is still alive somewhere, living under yet another name. If you want to find her, start with the man who helped her disappear. His name is Dr. Nathan Cole. He knows more than he has ever told me. I set the letter down and looked at Grace. She knew. I whispered. She knew Melissa was alive, and she never told me. She was protecting you, Grace said gently. The same way she protected all of us. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to rage against the injustice of it all. The years of grief I had suffered for a daughter who was not truly dead. But the anger would not come. All I felt was a profound, aching sadness. And beneath that sadness, something else. Something that felt almost like hope. I want to see Sophie, I said. Not as a stranger in a cemetery. I want to spend time with her, get to know her. I want her to know who I am. Grace hesitated. That is a big step. For both of you. I know. But she is my granddaughter. The only family I have left. I met Grace's eyes. Please. She studied me for a long moment, weighing the risks and the possibilities. Sophie finishes school at 3 o'clock. We could pick her up together, take her to the park. I will tell her you are an old friend of her great-grandmother's. We can go slowly. Let her get comfortable with you before we explain anything more. Thank you, I said. And I meant it with every fiber of my being. 3 hours later, I stood outside Jefferson Elementary School, watching a stream of children pour through the front doors. Grace stood beside me, scanning the crowd for Sophie's familiar braids. "There she is," Grace said, pointing. Sophie emerged from the building, clutching a purple backpack nearly as big as she was. When she spotted Grace, her face lit up with joy. She ran toward us, her braids bouncing, and threw herself into her grandmother's arms. "Grandma, guess what? I got a gold star on my spelling test." "That is wonderful, sweetheart." Grace hugged her tight, then turned her gently toward me. "Sophie, do you remember Mr. Bennett from the cemetery?" Sophie looked up at me with those impossible green eyes. For a moment, she seemed uncertain. Then, recognition dawned, and she smiled. "You are the sad grandpa," she said. "Are you still sad?" The question pierced my heart. "A little," I admitted. "But seeing you makes me feel better." Sophie considered this seriously, as if evaluating the truthfulness of my statement. Then she did something that shattered every defense I had built over 70 years of living. She reached out and took my hand. "Grandma says that when people are sad, they need friends," she said. "Do you want to be my friend, Mr. Bennett?" I knelt down, bringing myself to her eye level. Up close, the resemblance to Melissa was even more striking. The same curve of the cheek, the same stubborn set of the jaw, the same bright curiosity burning in those green eyes. "I would like that very much," I said. "And please, call me Richard." Sophie shook her head firmly. "That is a grown-up name. Can I call you Grandpa Richard instead?" I have never had a grandpa before. I looked at Grace, who nodded. Almost imperceptibly. "Grandpa Richard," I repeated, tasting the words. They felt like coming home. "I think that would be perfect. Are done full of reso. Are done fording same space." Sophie beamed and tugged on my hand. "Come on, Grandpa Richard. Let us go to the park." And so I followed my granddaughter into the October sunshine, feeling something I had not felt in 8 long years. Joy. The weeks that followed were the happiest I had known since Eleanor's death. I visited Sophie 3 times a week, always with Grace's blessing. We went to parks and museums and the zoo. We baked cookies in my kitchen, covering the counters with flour and filling the old Victorian house with laughter for the first time in years. Sophie showed me her favorite books, her collection of stuffed animals, and the drawings she made in art class. She drew me once, a tall figure with white hair and a big smile, holding hands with a small girl in a blue dress. "Grandpa Richard and me," she had written at the top in careful, wobbly letters. I framed it and hung it in my study, where I could see it every time I sat at Eleanor's desk. But even as I built this new relationship with my granddaughter, the mystery of Melissa's fate gnawed at me. Marcus Webb continued his investigation, digging into Dr. Nathan Cole's background, searching for any trace of where Melissa might have gone after staging her death. Progress was slow. Cole was careful, his records clean, his movements unremarkable. If he was hiding something, he was doing an excellent job of it. Then, on a cold morning in early November, everything changed. I was sitting in my living room, reading the newspaper. When the doorbell rang, I set down my coffee and walked to the foyer, expecting perhaps a package delivery or a neighbor collecting for charity. Instead, I found a woman standing on my porch. She was in her early 40s, with short auburn hair and a warm, professional smile. She wore blue scrubs beneath a gray cardigan, and a hospital identification badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. The badge read, "Diana Ross, RN, Home, Healthcare Services." "Mr. Bennett," she said, "I am Diana Ross, from Portland Home Healthcare. Your physician, Dr. Williams, referred you to our services." I frowned. "I do not recall requesting any home health care." "Oh, it is quite routine for patients your age." Her smile never wavered. Dr. Williams mentioned you live alone, and he thought you might benefit from regular check-ins, blood pressure monitoring, medication management, that sort of thing. It is completely covered by your insurance. Something felt wrong. I could not place it, but a cold unease settled in my stomach. I appreciate the offer, but I am perfectly capable of managing my own health. Of course you are. Diana's voice was soothing, almost hypnotic, but it never hurts to have a little extra support, especially after everything you have been through recently. I stiffened. What do you mean by that? Losing your wife? Living alone in this big house? She gestured at the Victorian facade behind me. It must be lonely. I just want to help. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside and let her in. Diana moved through my house with an ease that unsettled me. She complimented the architecture, admired the photographs on the walls, made small talk about the weather and the upcoming holidays. She took my blood pressure, checked my pulse, and asked about my medications with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. But her eyes were wrong. They moved too quickly, cataloging everything in the room, the antique furniture, the artwork, the locked cabinet where I kept Eleanor's jewelry. She was not looking at me like a nurse looks at a patient. She was looking at me like a predator, sizing up prey. You have a lovely home, she said, packing away her equipment. I noticed the construction company sign in some of your old photographs. Bennett Construction Group. Is that your business? It was. I retired 5 years ago. But you must have done very well for yourself. A house like this, in a neighborhood like this. She smiled again, but this time it did not reach her eyes. You must be quite comfortable. I do well enough. And your family? Do you have children? The question hit me like a slap. I forced my face to remain neutral. I had a daughter. She passed away several years ago. I am so sorry to hear that. Diana tilted her head, studying me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. It must be difficult, being all alone. No children, no grandchildren to keep you company. She was fishing. I was certain of it now. But for what? Number 40. Number 40. Number 40. Number 40. Thank you for your concern, I said, rising to indicate that the visit was over. But I really do not think I need home health care services. Diana stood as well. But she did not move toward the door. Instead, she stepped closer to me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something floral and cloying, like flowers at a funeral. Mr. Bennett, I know this must seem intrusive, but I really do want to help you. She placed a hand on my arm, her grip firm beneath the gentle facade. Sometimes the people we have lost are not as gone as we think they are. Sometimes they come back. In one form or another. My blood turned to ice. What did you say? Diana's smile widened. Just a thought. I will be back next week to check on you. Same time, same day. Please try to be home. She walked to the door, pausing, with her hand on the knob. Oh, and Mr. Bennett? If you happen to find anything interesting in those old boxes your wife kept, you might want to be careful who you share it with. Some secrets are better left buried. The door closed behind her, and I stood frozen in my foyer, my heart hammering against my ribs. She knew. Somehow, impossibly. Diana Ross knew about Margaret's letters, which meant she knew about Sophie. I called Marcus Webb the moment Diana's car disappeared around the corner. She knows, I said, my voice shaking. She knows about the letters, about Sophie, about everything. Slow down, Mr. Bennett. Tell me exactly what happened. I recounted the visit in detail, from Diana's unexpected arrival to her chilling final words. Marcus listened without interruption, and when I finished, the silence on the line stretched for several long seconds. Describe her again, he said finally. Height, build, eye color, anything distinctive. Average height, slim, auburn hair, cut short, brown eyes. I paused, searching my memory. Wait, her eyes. When she stood by the window, the light caught them at a certain angle. They looked almost green. Green, Marcus repeated. Like your daughters? The realization hit me like a physical blow. You think Diana is Melissa? I think we cannot rule it out. Hair can be dyed. Eye color can be changed with contacts. You said she moved through your house with unusual familiarity. Did anything else strike you as odd? I thought back, replaying the visit in my mind. The photographs, I said slowly. She paused in front of one particular picture. Melissa, at her nursing school graduation. She stared at it for several seconds before moving on. Did she comment on it? No. But her expression changed. Just for a moment, something flickered across her face, almost like recognition or pain. Marcus exhaled heavily. I need to look into this Diana Ross. Portland Home Healthcare. You said? That is what her badge said. I will make some calls. In the meantime, do not let her into your house again. If she shows up, tell her you have decided against the service. Do not confront her. Do not accuse her of anything. Just get her away from you. And if she is Melissa, my own daughter, then we need to understand why she has come back and why she is pretending to be a stranger. People do not create elaborate disguises to visit their parents for a friendly chat, Mr. Bennett. Something else is going on here. He was right. I knew he was right. But the thought that my daughter might be standing on my porch, wearing a false face and speaking to me in riddles, was almost too painful to bear. Diana returned 3 days later. This time, I was prepared. I had installed a security camera above the front door, and I kept my phone within reach at all times. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath and opened the door with a practiced smile. Diana, I was not expecting you until next week. I had a cancellation in my schedule, she said, breezing past me into the foyer before I could object. I thought I would check in early. How are you feeling? Fine. Actually, I have been meaning to call your office. I do not think I need home healthcare services after all. Diana turned to face me, her expression unchanged. Are you sure? I have been reviewing your medical records, and I noticed some concerning patterns. Your blood pressure has been elevated. Your cholesterol is borderline high. At your age, these things can escalate quickly. I appreciate your concern, but my regular doctor is more than capable of monitoring my health. Of course. Diana smiled, but her eyes remained cold. I just hate to see you struggle alone, especially with so much on your mind. She walked into the living room without invitation, settling into Eleanor's favorite arm as if she owned it. I noticed you have been spending time with a little girl lately, she said casually. I saw you at the park last week. She seemed very attached to you. My blood froze. She had been watching me, watching Sophie. She is the granddaughter of a friend, I said carefully. How lovely. It must be nice to have young energy around again. Diana crossed her legs, her posture relaxed and confident. Children are such a blessing. They remind us of what truly matters in life. I remained standing, refusing to sit down and extend this unwanted visit. Diana, I really must insist that you leave. I have appointments this afternoon. Just a few more minutes. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. I wanted to discuss something with you. A financial matter. She opened the folder and spread several documents across the coffee table. I recognized them immediately. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property records, all of them bearing my name. Where did you get those? I demanded. Public records. Mostly. The rest was not difficult to obtain. Diana looked up at me with an expression that might have been sympathetic, if not for the calculation behind her eyes. You are a wealthy man, Mr. Bennett. Bennett Construction Group was sold for quite a substantial sum when you retired, and this house alone must be worth several million in the current market. My finances are none of your business. Perhaps not. But I am worried about you. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Elderly people living alone are often targets for fraud, scammers, con artists. Distant relatives coming out of the woodwork to claim a piece of the pie. I have seen it happen too many times. Is that what this is? I asked coldly. A warning? Consider it friendly advice. Diana stood, gathering her documents. You should be careful who you trust, Mr. Bennett. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back at me. By the way, I noticed your signature on some of those bank documents looks a bit shaky. Tremors can be an early sign of cognitive decline. If you ever need help managing your affairs, I know some excellent financial advisors. The door closed behind her, and I immediately called Marcus. She has my financial records, I said. She is trying to gain access to my money. That confirms it. Marcus replied grimly. This is not just about reconnecting with family. She wants something from you, and she is willing to manipulate you to get it. But why? If she is Melissa, she knows I would give her anything she asked for. Would you? Even after learning she abandoned her daughter and lied to you for 8 years? I had no answer. I spent the next week reviewing every financial document I owned. It was tedious work, the kind I had delegated to accountants for decades. But Marcus had insisted, and I trusted his instincts. If Diana was attempting some kind of fraud, the evidence would be in the numbers. The evidence was worse than I imagined. On a Thursday morning, I sat at Eleanor's desk with bank statements spread across the surface like accusatory fingers. 3 cups of coffee had gone cold beside me, untouched. My reading glasses kept slipping down my nose, but I barely noticed. I was too focused on the impossible figures before my eyes. $50,000. Gone. I traced the transactions back through the statements, my hands trembling. The first withdrawal had occurred 6 weeks ago, just days before Diana's first visit. $20,000. Transferred to an account I did not recognize. The second came 2 weeks later. 15,000. Then another 10. Then 5. All of them authorized with my signature. Except I had never signed anything. I called my bank immediately. A pleasant young woman named Jennifer answered and pulled up my account with practiced efficiency. I see the transactions you are referring to, Mr. Bennett. They were all processed through our online banking portal, using your login credentials. The digital signatures match your profile. I do not use online banking, I said. I have never set up an account. A pause. Sir, according to our records, you enrolled in online banking services approximately 2 months ago. The enrollment was completed in person at our downtown branch. I have a copy of the enrollment form with your signature. That is impossible. I can email you a copy if you would like to review it. The email arrived within minutes. I stared at the scanned document, my stomach churning. The signature looked exactly like mine, the same slight forward slant, the same loop in the capital R, the same trailing line at the end of Bennett. But I had not signed it. I had not even been to the downtown branch in over a year. Someone had forged my signature. Someone had stolen my identity. And someone had been systematically draining my accounts for weeks. I thought of Diana's words. Your signature looks a bit shaky. Tremors can be an early sign of cognitive decline. She had been laying the groundwork, planting seeds of doubt about my mental capacity, building a narrative that would explain away any accusations I might make. Who would believe a confused old man over official bank documents? I called Marcus immediately. It is worse than we thought, I said, and explained what I had discovered. Marcus listened in grim silence. When I finished, he let out a long breath. This is a sophisticated operation. Forging signatures, creating false enrollment documents, accessing your accounts without triggering fraud alerts. Whoever is behind this has done it before. Diana? Almost certainly involved, but I doubt she is acting alone. This level of identity theft requires technical expertise and inside access. He paused. I think it is time we brought in the police. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. Not yet, Mr. Bennett. $50,000 has been stolen from you. This is a criminal matter, I know. But if Diana is Melissa, I need to understand why she is doing this before we involve the authorities. She is my daughter, Marcus. Whatever she has become, she is still my daughter. The line went silent for a long moment. You have 1 week, Marcus finally said. 1 week to get answers. After that, I am going to the police with or without your consent. I will not stand by and watch you be destroyed by someone you love. I agreed to his terms, though I was not certain I could keep them. That afternoon, I drove to Grace's apartment to warn her about Diana. She listened to my story with growing horror, her face pale beneath the warm lamplight of her living room. Sophie was at school, thank God, spared from this conversation. She has been following you? Grace asked. Following Sophie? She mentioned seeing us at the park. She knows about our relationship. Grace stood abruptly and walked to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. I knew this was a risk, she murmured. When Aunt Margaret gave me Sophie, she warned me that someday the past might catch up with us. I thought she meant the loan sharks, the people who had threatened Melissa. I never imagined that Melissa herself might be the threat. Grace turned to face me, her expression anguished. What do we do, Richard? How do we protect Sophie from her own mother? I had no answer. The question had been haunting me since Diana first appeared on my doorstep. How do you protect a child from someone who should love her more than anything? How do you explain that the mother she never knew has become a stranger, a predator, a thief? We keep her close, I said finally. We do not let her out of our sight. And we pray that I can reach Melissa before this goes any further. Grace nodded slowly, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. That night, I dreamed of Melissa as a little girl. She was running through the garden of our old house, chasing butterflies, her laughter ringing like bells. I called out to her, but she did not hear me. She just kept running, farther and farther, until she disappeared into a darkness I could not follow. I woke with tears on my pillow and the terrible certainty that I was losing her all over again. The photograph changed everything. It was 3 days after my discovery of the stolen funds. I had spent every waking hour searching for proof that Diana Ross was actually Melissa Bennett, some concrete evidence I could use to confront her. I had combed through Margaret's boxes twice more, reread every letter, examined every document. Nothing. Then, on a gray Sunday morning, I found it. I was cleaning out the attic, a task I had avoided for years. Eleanor had used the space for storage, filling it with boxes of holiday decorations, old furniture, and the accumulated memories of 4 decades of marriage. Dust motes floated in the pale light from the single window, and the air smelled of cedar and forgotten time. In the corner, behind a stack of Christmas ornament boxes, I found a trunk I did not recognize. It was old, made of battered leather with brass fittings tarnished by age. A small padlock secured the latch, but the lock was rusted and broke easily when I twisted it. Inside, wrapped in yellowed tissue paper, was a collection of items that made my heart stop. Baby clothes, a tiny pink dress, a knitted cap, a pair of impossibly small booties, a hospital bracelet, faded and brittle, with the name Baby Girl Bennett printed in smudged ink, and beneath everything, a photograph album. I carried the album downstairs to Eleanor's study and opened it with trembling hands. The first pages held photographs I remembered. Melissa as a newborn, red-faced and screaming. Melissa, at 1 year old, taking her first steps in our living room. Melissa at 2, covered in birthday cake frosting, grinning at the camera with pure, unfiltered joy. But as I turned the pages, the photographs became less familiar. Melissa, at 15, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under her eyes. Melissa at 18, her high school graduation portrait, her smile tight and forced. Melissa at 22, her nursing school graduation. The last photograph I had seen. Then the photographs changed entirely. I stared at an image I had never seen before. Melissa, older now, perhaps 28 or 29. She was standing in front of a modest apartment building, her hair cut short in a familiar style. Beside her stood a man in a white coat, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture of easy intimacy. The man was Dr. Nathan Cole. I recognized him instantly from the photograph Marcus had shown me. The forgettable face, the bland features, the unremarkable appearance that made him so difficult to remember. But there was nothing unremarkable about the way he looked at my daughter in this photograph. His expression was possessive, almost predatory. I turned the page. More photographs. Melissa and Cole at a restaurant, holding hands across the table. Melissa and Cole at a park, walking side by side. Melissa and Cole in a hospital corridor, both wearing scrubs, both smiling at the camera as if they were the happiest couple in the world. And then, a photograph that made my blood turn to ice. Melissa, heavily pregnant, standing in front of a nursery decorated in pink and yellow. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, and she was looking at something off camera with an expression of pure terror. Not joy, not anticipation, terror. In the background, barely visible in the corner of the frame, stood Nathan Cole. He was watching her with cold, calculating eyes. I understood then, with horrible clarity, who had truly controlled my daughter's life. Nathan Cole had not just helped Melissa fake her death. He had orchestrated everything. The false identity, the forged documents, the elaborate deception. And he had done it not to protect Melissa from loan sharks, but to possess her completely. She had not been running from criminals. She had been running from him. I grabbed the final photograph in the album and held it up to the light. It showed a woman standing at a bus station, her face turned away from the camera. She wore a gray cardigan over blue scrubs, and her auburn hair was cut short. A hospital badge hung from a lanyard around her neck. Diana Ross, RN. Home Healthcare Services. But the woman in the photograph was not Diana Ross. She was my daughter. I compared the image to the mental picture I had formed of Diana during her visits. The height was the same. The build was the same. The way she held herself, the way she moved, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. All of it matched perfectly. Diana Ross was Melissa Bennett. My daughter had come home at last. But not as the child I remembered, not as the troubled young woman who had begged her grandmother for help. She had returned as something else entirely. A predator, hunting her own father for money. Or had she? I thought back to her visits. The way her eyes had lingered on Melissa's graduation photograph. The strange sadness that had flickered across her face when she mentioned children. The cryptic warning about secrets being better left buried. Had she been threatening me? Or trying to warn me? And if Nathan Cole was behind all of this, where was he now? Was he the one pulling strings, using Melissa as a puppet to drain my accounts? I needed answers. And there was only one way to get them. I picked up my phone and called the number on Diana's business card. She answered on the second ring. Mr. Bennett. I was wondering when you would call. We need to talk, I said. Face to face. No more games, no more lies. I know who you are, Melissa. The silence that followed stretched for an eternity. Tomorrow, she finally said. Your house. Noon. Come alone. The line went dead. She arrived exactly at noon. I watched her car pull into the driveway from my study window. A silver sedan, practical and forgettable. The kind of vehicle that would never draw a second glance. She sat behind the wheel for several minutes, not moving, her face hidden by the reflection of the autumn sky on the windshield. Finally, she emerged. She was not wearing scrubs today. Instead, she had dressed in dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. Without the nurse's uniform, without the professional facade, she looked smaller somehow. More vulnerable. More like the daughter I remembered. I opened the front door before she could ring the bell. We stood facing each other across the threshold, neither of us speaking. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The shape of her face, the curve of her cheekbones, the stubborn set of her jaw. She had Eleanor's nose and my mother's forehead, and the same green eyes I saw every time Sophie looked at me. "Hello, Daddy," she said. The word broke something inside my chest. "Come in," I managed. "We have a lot to discuss." She followed me into the living room. I had arranged 2 chairs facing each other, with a small table between them. A pot of coffee sat on the table, still steaming, beside 2 cups I had not yet filled. The setup felt formal, almost like an interrogation. But I needed the distance. I needed the structure. She sat down without being asked, her movements careful and controlled. I took the opposite chair and studied her face, searching for traces of the child I had raised, the teenager who had screamed at me across the dinner table, the young woman who had walked out of my life on Christmas Eve. "How long have you been watching me?" I asked. 2 months. Since I came back to Portland. And before that, I was in Seattle, then Spokane, then a dozen other cities I barely remember. She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "Nathan moved us constantly, never stayed anywhere longer than a year. He said it was safer that way." Nathan Cole. The name tasted bitter in my mouth. "Your accomplice, the man who forged your dental records." Melissa flinched as if I had struck her. "He was not my accomplice. He was my captor." I leaned forward. "Explain." She took a deep breath. And when she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I met Nathan in 2012, when I was working at Seattle General Hospital. He was a forensic consultant, charming and attentive, and everything I thought I needed. I was still struggling with addiction, still drowning in debt, still desperate for someone to rescue me. Nathan saw all of that. He used all of that." She paused, her eyes distant. "At first, he was perfect. He paid off my debts, got me into a treatment program, helped me rebuild my career. I thought he loved me. I thought I had finally found someone who understood. But he did not love you," I said. "No. He owned me." Melissa's voice hardened. "Nathan is a predator, Daddy. He finds vulnerable women, isolates them from their families, and controls every aspect of their lives. By the time I realized what he was, I was already pregnant with Sophie and completely dependent on him. Why did you not come to me? To your mother? Because he would have killed you." She met my eyes, and I saw the truth of her words reflected in their depths. "Nathan does not tolerate interference. The one time I tried to call Mom, he broke 2 of my fingers. He told me if I ever contacted my family again, he would burn this house down with everyone inside." I felt sick. My daughter had been living a nightmare for years, suffering abuse I could not have imagined, and I had spent that time mourning her at an empty grave. "The fake death," I said. "That was his idea?" "Yes and no." Melissa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I was desperate to escape him. I had been planning for months, saving money in secret, memorizing bus schedules and shelter addresses. Then Nathan found out I was going to run. He was furious. He said, if I wanted to disappear, he would help me do it properly. He arranged the car accident. He arranged everything. The forged dental records, the closed casket, the anonymous body they buried in my name. I still do not know whose body it was. Some homeless woman, probably. Someone nobody would miss. The horror of it washed over me in waves. My daughter had been complicit in a murder, or at least in the concealment of one. Whatever crimes she had committed since then paled in comparison. "And Sophie?" I asked. "You abandoned her with Margaret?" Melissa's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face, and her voice broke into a sob. "I did not abandon her. I saved her." Nathan wanted to use Sophie as leverage against me. He wanted to raise her, mold her, turn her into another victim. I could not let that happen, so I begged Grandma Margaret to take her. I begged her to hide Sophie somewhere Nathan would never find her. "Margaret kept your secret for years. She died keeping your secret. I know." Melissa buried her face in her hands. "I know, and I hate myself for it every single day. I put that burden on an old woman who loved me, and it probably killed her. I watched my daughter weep. And despite everything, despite the theft and the lies and the years of deception, I felt my heart breaking for her. "Why did you come back?" I asked gently. "Why now?" Melissa looked up, her face streaked with tears. "Because Nathan found me. 3 months ago, he tracked me down in Spokane. He said he knows about Sophie. He said if I do not bring him money, enough money to disappear again, he will take her." Her eyes met mine, wild, with desperation. "I did not want to steal from you, Daddy, but I did not know what else to do. I thought if I could just get enough to pay him off, he would leave us alone forever. $50,000? It is not enough. He wants 200,000, and if I do not deliver it by the end of the month, he is coming for Sophie." End quote. I sat in stunned silence, processing everything Melissa had told me. My daughter was not a mastermind criminal. She was a victim, trapped in a web of abuse and manipulation that had spanned nearly a decade. The theft from my accounts, the elaborate disguise, the cryptic warnings about buried secrets, all of it had been desperate attempts to protect her child from a monster. "Tell me everything," I said. "From the beginning. I need to understand exactly what we are dealing with." Melissa nodded, wiping her tears with the tissue I offered her. "Nathan is not just a forensic consultant," she began. "That is his cover, his legitimate face. But his real business is far darker. He specializes in making people disappear, criminals who need new identities, witnesses who want to escape protection programs, abusive spouses who want their victims to vanish forever." "He helps abusers?" I asked, horrified. "He helps anyone who can pay." "Nathan does not care about morality. He cares about money and control." Melissa's voice hardened with bitter experience. "When I met him, I thought he was my savior. He paid off the loan sharks, made my problems disappear. But the price was my freedom." "How does he operate?" "He has connections everywhere. Inside hospitals, police departments, government agencies. He can forge any document, access any database, create any identity. The dental records used to identify my supposed body? Child's play for him. The death certificate, the burial records, the insurance claims, all fabricated, with a few phone calls. I thought of Marcus Webb's investigation, the dead ends and false trails that had frustrated every attempt to uncover the truth. "That is why we could not find any records of Catherine Moore," I said. "He created her from nothing, and he can destroy her just as easily." Melissa leaned forward, her expression urgent. "When I escaped from Nathan 3 years ago, I thought I was finally free. I moved to Spokane, changed my appearance, got a job at a small clinic under yet another name. For 2 years, I lived in constant fear. But nothing happened. I started to believe he had moved on to other victims. But he had not. No, he was just waiting, watching. 3 months ago, he walked into my clinic as casually as if we had seen each other yesterday. He smiled at me and said, "Hello, Melissa. I have missed you." She shuddered at the memory. He told me he knew everything. Where I lived, where I worked, and most importantly, where Sophie was. He showed me photographs. "Daddy, photographs of Sophie at school, at the park, at Grace's apartment." He had been tracking her for months. My blood ran cold. That predator had been watching my granddaughter, stalking her like prey, and none of us had known. "What does he want?" I asked. "Money. Always money. Nathan's operation is expensive to maintain. Bribes, payoffs, equipment, safe houses. He told me his latest venture had gone badly, that he needed cash to rebuild, and he knew exactly where to get it. From me, from you." Melissa's eyes filled with shame. "He gave me a choice. Either I help him drain your accounts, or he takes Sophie and sells her to the highest bidder. There are people, Daddy, terrible people who pay fortunes for healthy children. Nathan knows all of them." The horror of her words struck me like a physical blow. Sell Sophie, my granddaughter, the little girl who called me Grandpa Richard and showed me how high she could swing. I could not let that happen, Melissa continued. So, I agreed to his plan. I came back to Portland, created the Diana Ross identity, and started working my way into your life. Nathan gave me the forged bank documents, taught me how to access your accounts remotely. $50,000, and he wants $150,000 more by the end of the month. Her voice cracked. I do not have it, Daddy. I have nothing. Everything I earn goes to staying hidden, staying alive. And now Nathan is getting impatient. What happens if you do not pay? Melissa closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, I saw naked terror. He will come for Sophie himself. He will take her somewhere I will never find her. And then he will come for you, because you know too much. She grabbed my hands, her fingers cold and trembling. We have to run. All of us. You, me, Sophie, Grace. We have to disappear before Nathan makes his move. The word came out firm and final. Melissa stared at me in disbelief. Daddy, you do not understand. Nathan is dangerous. He has killed before. He will not hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens his operation. I understand perfectly. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the garden Eleanor had loved so much. The roses were dying now, their petals brown and scattered across the frost-touched earth. I am 70 years old, Melissa. I have lost my wife, mourned my daughter for 8 years, and only recently discovered I have a granddaughter. I will not spend whatever time I have left running from a criminal. Then what do you suggest? I turned to face her. We fight. We expose Nathan Cole for what he is. We bring him down and make sure he can never threaten our family again. How? He has connections everywhere. The police, the courts, the hospitals. Who would believe us over him? We do not need everyone to believe us. We just need the right people. I reached for my phone. Marcus Webb spent 15 years with the FBI, investigating exactly this kind of predator. He knows people who cannot be bought, agencies that specialize in dismantling criminal networks. Melissa shook her head frantically. If Nathan finds out we have gone to the authorities, he will accelerate his timeline. He will take Sophie before anyone can stop him. Then we need to move Sophie somewhere safe first. Tonight, before Nathan realizes anything has changed, I dialed Marcus's number. Marcus, it is Richard. I need your help. My daughter is alive, and we are all in danger. We were too late. Marcus arrived at my house within the hour, his face grim as I introduced him to Melissa. He listened to her story without interruption, taking notes in a small leather notebook, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Nathan Cole, he said when she finished. I know that name. 15 years ago, when I was still with the Bureau, we investigated him in connection with a witness tampering case. 3 protected witnesses disappeared within 6 months, all of them scheduled to testify against a human trafficking ring. We suspected Cole was involved, but we could never prove it. He is careful, Melissa said. Everyone makes mistakes eventually. Marcus closed his notebook. The first priority is securing Sophie. Where is she now? At Grace's apartment, I said. School ended 2 hours ago. Marcus was already reaching for his phone. I have contacts in the U.S. Marshals Service. They can arrange protective custody within 24 hours. In the meantime, we need to move Sophie and Grace to a secure location. I called Grace while Marcus made his arrangements. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. A cold dread began to creep up my spine. She is not answering, I said. Marcus looked up sharply. Try her cell phone. I did. It went straight to voicemail. Something is wrong. I grabbed my coat from the rack by the door. We need to get over there now. The drive to Grace's apartment took 15 minutes. It felt like 15 hours. Melissa sat beside me in the passenger seat, her face pale, her hands clenched in her lap. Marcus followed in his own car, his expression visible in my rearview mirror. None of us spoke. Grace lived in a modest apartment complex in the Hawthorne district, a 3-story building with a shared courtyard and a security gate that never worked properly. I parked haphazardly at the curb and ran toward the entrance, my old knees screaming in protest. The front door was unlocked. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Grace? I pushed the door open. Sophie? The apartment was empty. Not just empty. Ransacked. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. Sophie's purple backpack lay abandoned by the couch, its contents spilled across the carpet. Crayons and picture books and the stuffed rabbit she carried everywhere. No, Melissa whispered behind me. No, no, no. I walked through the destruction in a daze, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. In Sophie's bedroom, her bed was unmade, her favorite blanket missing. On the dining room table, I found the note, a single sheet of white paper, folded once, with my name written on the front in precise, elegant handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Dear Mr. Bennett, it read, I believe you have something that belongs to me. Specifically, $150,000 that your daughter was supposed to deliver by the end of the month. Unfortunately, Melissa has proven herself unreliable, so I have been forced to take alternative measures to ensure payment. I would hate for anything unfortunate to happen to her. You have 48 hours to transfer the full amount to the account listed below. Once payment is confirmed, Sophie will be returned unharmed. If you contact the police, if you involve the FBI, if you do anything other than exactly what I have instructed, I will know. And Sophie will suffer the consequences. Do not test me, Mr. Bennett. I am not a patient man. Regards, Nathan Cole. The paper fell from my fingers. Marcus picked it up and read it, his jaw tightening with each line. When he finished, he pulled out his phone and began making calls, speaking in low, urgent tones I could not quite hear. Melissa collapsed onto the ruined couch, her body shaking with silent sobs. This is my fault, she gasped. I should have paid him. I should have found a way. This is not your fault. I knelt beside her, taking her hands in mine. Nathan Cole is a monster. He chose to do this. He is the only one responsible. But Sophie, my baby. He has my baby. I pulled her into my arms, holding her the way I had when she was a child, when nightmares woke her screaming in the dark. She clung to me, her tears soaking through my shirt, and I made a silent vow I would get Sophie back. Whatever it took, whatever it cost. Marcus ended his call and approached us, his expression carefully neutral. I have people searching for Grace. If she is alive, we will find her. And Sophie? I asked. Cole is smart. He will have taken her somewhere secure, somewhere we cannot easily find. But smart is not the same as invincible. Marcus met my eyes. I have a contact in the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit. She is the best in the business. If anyone can find Sophie, it is her. Nathan said, no police. No FBI. Nathan says a lot of things. That does not mean we have to listen. Marcus placed a hand on my shoulder. I know, this is terrifying, but we have 48 hours. And we are not going to waste them sitting around waiting for a ransom drop. We are going to find your granddaughter, and we are going to bring her home. I looked at Melissa, still trembling in my arms. We are going to bring her home, I repeated. I promise. It was a promise I intended to keep. Detective Sarah Mitchell arrived at Grace's apartment within the hour. She was a compact woman in her early 50s, with steel gray hair cropped short, and eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of the crime scene in a single glance. She wore a dark blazer over a simple blouse, and her badge hung from a chain around her neck. When she shook my hand, her grip was firm and businesslike. Mr. Bennett, I am Detective Sarah Mitchell, FBI Crimes Against Children Unit. Marcus briefed me on the situation on my way over. She surveyed the ransacked apartment with practiced efficiency. Tell me everything that happened. From the beginning. I recounted the story as completely as I could. From Sophie's first appearance at the cemetery to Nathan Cole's kidnapping note. Detective Mitchell listened without interruption, occasionally jotting notes in a small spiral pad. When I finished, she turned to Melissa. Miss Bennett, I understand you have had direct contact with Nathan Cole over an extended period. I need you to tell me everything you know about his operation. Associates, locations, methods, patterns, anything that might help us find your daughter. Melissa wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. The despair that had overwhelmed her moments ago was slowly being replaced by something harder, something fiercer. Nathan operates out of multiple locations, she said. He never stays in one place for long, but he has patterns. Safe houses he returns to when he needs to lay low. Properties registered under shell companies, always in quiet neighborhoods where no one asks questions. Do you know the locations of any of these safe houses? I know of 3. One in Seattle, near the waterfront. One in Tacoma, in an industrial district. And one here in Portland, in the warehouse district near the river. Detective Mitchell's eyes sharpened. The Portland location. Tell me more. It is an old cannery building, converted into storage units. Nathan bought it through a company called Riverside Holdings about 5 years ago. He uses it to store documents, equipment, sometimes people. Melissa's voice caught. He took me there once, when I tried to escape. I felt sick at the casual cruelty of her words. 3 days. My daughter had been held captive for 3 days, and I had known nothing. Detective Mitchell was already on her phone, speaking rapidly to someone on the other end. I need a team at the Riverside Holdings property on Northwest Industrial Avenue. Possible kidnapping victim. 7-year-old female. Suspect is Nathan Cole. Consider armed and dangerous. She paused, listening. Yes. I am aware of the jurisdictional issues. This is a federal case now. Get me that team. She ended the call and turned back to us. We are going to search that warehouse. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Bennett. Nathan Cole is a professional. He has evaded law enforcement for over a decade. The chances that he would take Sophie to a location your daughter knows about are slim. Then why search it at all? Because professionals make mistakes when they are under pressure. And right now, Cole is under significant pressure. Mitchell glanced at her notes. He set a 48-hour deadline. That suggests urgency. Something has gone wrong with his operation. Something that requires immediate cash. Urgent people make sloppy decisions. Marcus stepped forward. What about Grace Chen? Any sign of her? My team found her car abandoned 3 blocks from here. Signs of a struggle. Blood on the driver's seat, but not enough to indicate a fatal injury. Mitchell's expression remained carefully neutral. We believe she was taken along with Sophie, probably as additional leverage, or as a witness to eliminate. Marcus said grimly, that is a possibility we are prepared for. The next 6 hours passed in a blur of activity. Detective Mitchell established a command center at my house, transforming Eleanor's study into a makeshift operations room. Agents came and went, speaking into radios and studying maps spread across every available surface. Melissa sat in the corner, answering an endless stream of questions about Nathan Cole's habits, preferences, and weaknesses. I felt useless. For 40 years, I had solved problems. I had built buildings, and managed budgets, and negotiated deals worth millions of dollars. But this was beyond my expertise. My granddaughter was in the hands of a monster, and there was nothing I could do but wait. At midnight, Detective Mitchell received a call that changed everything. I watched her face as she listened, saw the subtle shift in her expression from professional neutrality to guarded hope. Understood. Hold your position. I am on my way. She ended the call and turned to face us. We found something at the warehouse. Sophie? Melissa jumped to her feet. Not Sophie. But we found evidence that she was there within the last 12 hours. Clothing, food wrappers, and this. She held up an evidence bag containing a small yellow daisy, pressed flat and slightly wilted. I recognized it immediately. The same kind of flower Sophie had placed on her mother's grave the day I met her. "She left it for us," I said. "She knew we would come looking. Smart girl." Mitchell allowed herself a small smile. "We also found documentation that links Cole to 3 other properties in the Portland area. My team is coordinating with local law enforcement to search all of them simultaneously." "When?" Marcus asked. "Dawn. We hit all 3 locations at first light, before Cole has a chance to move her again." Mitchell met my eyes. "I cannot promise we will find Sophie, Mr. Bennett, but I can promise we will do everything in our power to bring her home." I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. Somewhere out there, in the cold November darkness, my granddaughter was waiting for rescue. We would not let her down. I did not sleep that night. None of us did. Melissa paced the living room like a caged animal, her footsteps wearing a path across Eleanor's antique carpet. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, studying maps and aerial photographs of the 3 target locations. I stood at the window, watching the darkness slowly fade to gray as dawn approached. At 5:30, Detective Mitchell gathered us in the study. "Here is the situation," she said, pointing to a map spread across Eleanor's desk. "We have 3 locations to hit simultaneously. The first is the warehouse on Northwest Industrial Avenue, where we found evidence of Sophie's presence. The second is a residential property in the Selwood neighborhood, registered to one of Cole's shell companies. The third is a storage facility near the airport." She tapped each location in turn. "My team will take the warehouse. Local police will handle the Selwood property, and a joint FBI Portland PD team will secure the airport facility. We go in at exactly 6:15, when there is enough light to operate safely but early enough to catch anyone inside off guard." "What about us?" I asked. "What do we do?" Mitchell's expression softened slightly. "You wait here. I know that is not the answer you want, but this is a tactical operation. Civilians on scene would only complicate matters. That is my granddaughter out there. I understand. And I promise you, the moment we have her, you will be the first to know." She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Trust me, Mr. Bennett. We are going to bring Sophie home." The next 45 minutes were the longest of my life. I sat in Eleanor's chair, staring at the phone in my hands, willing it to ring. Melissa sat beside me, her fingers intertwined with mine. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing left to say. At 6:22, the phone rang. I answered before the first ring had finished. "Mr. Bennett, this is Mitchell. We have secured the warehouse and the Selwood property. No sign of Sophie or Grace at either location." My heart sank. "And the airport facility?" The team encountered resistance. 2 of Cole's associates were on site, armed and hostile. There was an exchange of gunfire. Both suspects are in custody. But what? A pause. Then, one of them talked. He said Cole moved Sophie and Grace 12 hours ago, after he realized we had searched the warehouse. He took them to a 4th location, somewhere not on our list. "Where?" "An abandoned meatpacking plant on the east side of the river. The suspect claims Cole has been using it as an emergency safe house for years, completely off the books." Mitchell's voice tightened. "I am redirecting all available units there now. But it is going to take time to assemble a proper tactical team." "How much time?" "At least an hour. Maybe more." "An hour." In an hour, Nathan Cole could disappear with Sophie forever. He could take her across state lines, out of the country, somewhere we would never find her. I made a decision. "Give me the address." "Mr. Bennett, I cannot let you." "Give me the address, detective. My granddaughter is in that building, and I am not going to sit here while a madman decides her fate." Silence on the line. Then, reluctantly, 4700 block of Southeast Industrial Way. "But I am warning you. Do not approach the building. Wait for backup." I ended the call and turned to Melissa. "I am going," I said. "You should stay here." "Not a chance." She was already reaching for her coat. "Sophie is my daughter. I am coming with you. Marcus appeared in the doorway, car keys in hand. I heard everything. My car is faster than yours. Let us go. We sped through the early morning streets, running red lights and ignoring speed limits. The city blurred past my window, familiar landmarks transformed into unrecognizable shapes by fear and adrenaline. Marcus drove with the focused intensity of a man who had done this before. His jaw set, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The meatpacking plant loomed before us, a decaying monument to Portland's industrial past. Rusted pipes snaked across its facade. Broken windows stared down like empty eye sockets. A chain-link fence surrounded the property, topped with razor wire that glinted in the pale morning light. Marcus parked a block away, behind a row of abandoned shipping containers. We go in quiet, he said, checking the pistol he had retrieved from his glove compartment. No heroics. We find Sophie. We get her out. We let the professionals handle Cole. And if Cole finds us first? Melissa asked. Marcus met her eyes. Then, we do whatever it takes to protect that little girl. We approached the fence on foot, staying low, using the containers and debris as cover. The gate was padlocked, but a section of fence near the back had been cut and bent outward, leaving a gap just large enough to squeeze through. Inside, the plant was a maze of rusted machinery and collapsed catwalks. The smell of decay hung heavy in the air, mixed with something else. Something chemical and sharp that made my eyes water. Melissa grabbed my arm and pointed. Light. Flickering through a grimy window on the second floor. That is where he is, she whispered. I recognized the setup. He always keeps a lantern burning in whatever room he uses. We found a staircase at the far end of the building, its steps groaning under our weight despite our attempts at silence. At the top, a long corridor stretched before us, lined with doors that had long since rotted off their hinges. At the end of the corridor, one door remained intact, and behind it, I heard a sound that made my heart stop. Sophie's voice, small and frightened, calling for her grandmother. Marcus held up his hand, signaling us to stop. He moved ahead silently, pressing himself against the wall beside the door. He listened for a moment, then held up 3 fingers. 3 people inside. He pointed at himself, then at the door, then made a gesture I understood immediately. He was going in first. I wanted to protest, to tell him that this was my fight, my family. But Marcus was the professional. He had done this hundreds of times. So I nodded and stepped back, pulling Melissa behind me. Marcus took a breath. Then he kicked the door open. The room beyond was larger than I expected. A former office space now converted into a makeshift prison. Bare concrete walls, a single lantern casting flickering shadows, and 2 figures huddled in the corner, Sophie and Grace. They were bound together with zip ties, their backs against a rusted filing cabinet. Grace had a bruise on her forehead and dried blood on her lip, but her eyes were alert, fierce with protective anger. Sophie was pressed against her side, clutching her missing blanket, her face streaked with tears. The moment Sophie saw me, her eyes went wide. "Grandpa Richard!" I started toward her, every instinct screaming at me to reach her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be all right. Then I heard the click of a gun being cocked behind me. "That is far enough, Mr. Bennett." I turned slowly. Nathan Cole stood in the doorway we had just entered, a pistol aimed at Marcus's chest. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 45, with the forgettable face I remembered from the photographs. But there was nothing forgettable about his eyes. They were cold and flat, like stones at the bottom of a frozen lake. "Drop the weapon," he said to Marcus. Slowly. On the ground. Marcus hesitated for just a moment. Then he bent down and placed his pistol on the concrete floor. Nathan kicked it away, sending it skittering into the shadows. "I have to admit, I am impressed," Nathan said, his voice conversational, almost friendly. "I did not expect you to find this place so quickly. My associate must have talked." He shrugged. "No matter. I have contingencies for contingencies. Let them go." I said. "Take me instead. I am the one with the money. I am the one you want." Nathan laughed. It was a hollow sound, utterly devoid of warmth. Mr. Bennett, you misunderstand the situation. I do not want your money anymore. I want your silence. He gestured with the gun. You see, you and your daughter have caused me significant problems. My network is compromised. My associates are in custody. My carefully constructed operation is crumbling around me. He stepped closer, and I could smell his cologne, something expensive and sharp. So now I need to disappear. And I cannot do that if there are witnesses who can identify me. He smiled, a thin, reptilian expression. I am sure you understand. You cannot kill all of us, Marcus said. The FBI knows about this location. They are on their way. Then I had better work quickly. He raised the gun toward Marcus. Melissa lunged forward, throwing herself between Nathan and Marcus. Nathan's eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with cold fury. Melissa. My beautiful, troublesome Melissa. He grabbed her arm, yanking her toward him. I gave you everything. A new identity. A new life. And this is how you repay me? By leading the police to my door? You gave me a cage, Melissa spat. You gave me fear and pain and years of looking over my shoulder. That is not a life, Nathan. That is a prison, perhaps. But it was a comfortable prison. He pressed the gun against her temple. Now it ends. For all of us. Sophie screamed. The sound cut through the tension like a knife, high and piercing, and filled with pure terror. Nathan flinched. Just for a moment, his attention shifting toward the little girl in the corner. It was enough. I moved without thinking, decades of survival instinct overriding the weakness of my 70-year-old body. I grabbed the rusted metal chair beside me and swung it with every ounce of strength I possessed. The chair connected with Nathan's arm just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, shattering a window behind us. Nathan stumbled, the gun flying from his grip. Marcus dove for it, but Nathan was faster. He kicked Marcus in the ribs, sending him sprawling, and lunged for the weapon. I tackled him. We went down together, crashing into a pile of debris. Pain exploded through my shoulder, my hip, my knees. Nathan was younger, stronger, faster. He threw me off easily, his fist connecting with my jaw in a blow that filled my vision with stars. But I had bought enough time. Melissa had freed the gun from the shadows. She stood over us now, the weapon pointed at Nathan's head, her hands steady despite the terror in her eyes. Do not move, she said. Not 1 inch. Nathan froze. Slowly, he raised his hands. Melissa, he said, his voice soft and soothing. We had nothing. Melissa's voice was ice. You took everything from me. My family, my daughter, my life. And now it is over. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sophie's voice cut through the chaos. Small, but strong. Mommy? Melissa looked at her daughter for the first time in 8 years. Tears streamed down her face. Yes, baby. It is me. Mommy is here. Sophie began to cry, reaching out her bound hands toward the mother she had never known. And in that moment, despite the blood and the pain and the destruction all around us, I saw something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. The FBI arrived 7 minutes later. Detective Mitchell was first through the door, her weapon drawn, her team fanning out behind her. She took in the scene with a single glance. Nathan Cole on his knees with Melissa's gun, still trained on his head, me bleeding on the floor. Sophie and Grace still bound in the corner. Secure the suspect, she ordered. 2 agents moved forward, forcing Nathan's hands behind his back and snapping handcuffs around his wrists. He did not resist. The cold calculation had drained from his eyes, replaced by something I had never expected to see there. Fear. Nathan Cole, you are under arrest for kidnapping, extortion, identity fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Mitchell's voice was flat and official. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Nathan said nothing as they hauled him to his feet, But as they led him past me, he paused and looked down at my bloodied face. "This is not over, old man," he whispered. "I have friends. I have resources. You cannot hide from me forever." "Maybe not," I replied, my voice hoarse with pain. "But you will be hiding from the world for the rest of your life." They took him away. Melissa dropped the gun as if it had burned her and ran to Sophie. An agent cut the zip ties binding Sophie and Grace, and suddenly the little girl was in her mother's arms, sobbing against her chest. "Mommy! Mommy! Mommy!" Sophie cried, the word a prayer and a plea and a celebration all at once. "I am here, baby." Melissa held her daughter so tightly, I thought she might never let go. "I am here. I am never leaving you again. Never." I watched them from the floor, my vision blurring with tears and exhaustion. This was what I had wanted, what I had fought for, what I had risked everything to achieve. My granddaughter was safe, my daughter was free, and the monster who had haunted them both was finally in chains. Grace knelt beside me, her face etched with concern. "Richard, you are hurt. We need to get you to a hospital." "I am fine," I said, though we both knew it was a lie. "Just let me watch them for a moment. Let me see them together." She helped me sit up, supporting my weight against her shoulder. Sophie had stopped crying, her small hands clutching her mother's sweater as if afraid she might disappear again. "Is the bad man gone?" Sophie asked. "Yes, sweetheart. The bad man is gone forever. And you are really my mommy? The one who went to heaven?" Melissa's voice caught. "I did not go to heaven, baby. I went somewhere far away because I was trying to protect you from the bad man. But I thought about you every single day, every single moment. And now I am back, and nothing will ever separate us again." Sophie considered this with the serious intensity only a 7-year-old could muster. "Grandpa Richard helped find you," she said finally. "He is very brave for an old person." I laughed, despite the pain in my ribs. "Thank you, sweetheart. I think." Melissa looked at me, her eyes red with tears, but shining with gratitude. "She is right. You are brave. Braver than I ever gave you credit for." She crossed the room and knelt beside me, taking my hand in hers. "I am sorry, Daddy, for everything. For the lies, the theft, the years of silence. I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just too ashamed to face you." "You have nothing to be ashamed of," I said. "You survived. You protected your daughter. That is all that matters." "But Mom, she died thinking I was dead. She never knew about Sophie. If I had just come home, told the truth." "Your mother loved you," I interrupted, "more than anything in the world. And if she were here right now, she would be holding Sophie in her arms and telling you exactly what I am telling you. You did what you had to do. You saved your child. That is what parents do." Melissa broke down then, sobbing against my shoulder the way she had when she was a little girl. I held her as best I could with my battered body, and I thought about Eleanor, about Margaret, about all the people who had loved Melissa and kept her secrets and sacrificed their own peace to keep her safe. They were gone now, but their love remained, woven into the fabric of this impossible reunion. Detective Mitchell approached us, her expression softening. "We need to get you all to the hospital for evaluation. Mr. Bennett, you may have broken ribs, and Sophie and Grace need to be checked for injuries." "What happens now?" I asked. "With Nathan, he will be held without bail pending trial. The charges we have on him are enough to put him away for life, and we are just getting started. My team is executing search warrants on all his properties as we speak. By the time we are done, we will have enough evidence to shut down his entire network." "And Melissa?" Mitchell hesitated. "That is more complicated. She was involved in identity fraud and theft. Even if under duress, there will need to be an investigation." "She was a victim," I said firmly. "Everything she did because Nathan Cole forced her. I understand. And I will make sure the prosecutor understands as well." Mitchell looked at Melissa with something like sympathy. In the meantime, she is free to go. We know where to find her. Free. It was a word I had not dared to hope for. We left the meatpacking plant together. My daughter on one side of me, my granddaughter on the other. The morning sun was fully risen now, painting the industrial wasteland in shades of gold and amber. For the first time in 8 years, my family was whole. The trial of Nathan Cole began on a gray January morning, 3 months after his arrest. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, flanked by Grace and Marcus. Melissa was not beside us. She had been called as the prosecution's key witness and was sequestered in a waiting room somewhere in the building, preparing to testify against the man who had controlled her life for nearly a decade. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the press gallery, their notebooks open, their eyes hungry for every detail of the case that had captivated the nation. Nathan Cole's arrest had made headlines from coast to coast. A forensic consultant who helped criminals disappear, who forged identities for abusers and traffickers, who had kidnapped a 7-year-old girl to extort her grandfather. The story had everything: drama, danger, and a 70-year-old hero who had risked his life to save his family. I did not feel like a hero. I felt tired and old and grateful that Sophie was safe at home with a court-appointed guardian, far from the circus of the trial. Judge Eleanor Whitman entered the courtroom, her black robes flowing behind her. She was a stern woman in her 60s, known for her no-nonsense approach and her intolerance for courtroom theatrics. "This court is now in session," she announced. "The People versus Nathan Andrew Cole. Charges include kidnapping in the first degree, extortion, identity fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice." Prosecutor David Chen rose from his table. He was a compact man with silver-streaked hair and the confident bearing of someone who had won more cases than he had lost. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, "over the next several weeks, you will hear testimony that exposes the true nature of the defendant. Nathan Cole is not the respectable professional he pretends to be. He is a predator who spent over a decade exploiting vulnerable people for profit." Chen paced before the jury box, his voice rising with controlled passion. "The evidence will show that Nathan Cole created false identities for criminals seeking to escape justice. He forged documents for abusers who wanted their victims to disappear. He helped human traffickers evade law enforcement. And when one of his victims tried to escape his control, he stalked her for years, ultimately kidnapping her 7-year-old daughter and holding her for ransom." He paused, letting the words sink in. Melissa Bennett was not Nathan Cole's partner. For 8 years, she lived under his complete control. When she finally found the courage to reach out to her father, Nathan Cole responded by kidnapping her daughter Sophie. The prosecutor turned to face Nathan, who sat at the defense table in an expensive gray suit, his expression carefully blank. "The defendant will try to convince you that he is a legitimate businessman, that Melissa Bennett was a willing participant in his schemes, that this is all a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Do not be deceived. Nathan Cole is a monster in a tailored suit, and it is time for him to answer for his crimes." Defense attorney Victoria Hayes rose to deliver her opening statement. She was a tall woman, with sharp features and a reputation for defending wealthy clients against seemingly insurmountable evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "the prosecution would have you believe that my client is some kind of criminal mastermind. The reality is far more mundane. Nathan Cole is a forensic consultant who made the mistake of becoming romantically involved with a troubled woman." I gripped the armrest of my seat, forcing myself to remain silent. Melissa Bennett has a documented history of drug addiction, financial instability, and deceptive behavior. She created the Catherine Moore identity herself to escape debts and obligations she could not face. My client tried to help her, tried to support her through her struggles, and this is his reward. Hayes gestured toward Nathan with practiced sympathy. "As for the kidnapping charge, the evidence will show that my client was attempting to facilitate a reunion between mother and daughter, not holding anyone for ransom. The so-called ransom note was a misunderstanding. a poorly worded attempt to arrange financial support for Sophie's care. I wanted to stand up and call her a liar. I wanted to tell the jury about the terror in Sophie's voice when she called for her grandmother, about the bruises on Grace's face, about the years of suffering Melissa had endured at Nathan's hands. But I held my tongue. My time would come. The first week of the trial was devoted to forensic evidence. FBI analysts testified about the documents found in Nathan's properties, the forged identities, the financial records linking him to dozens of criminals across the country. Detective Mitchell presented the evidence from the meatpacking plant, including the yellow daisy Sophie had left as a signal. The second week brought the victim testimonies. Grace took the stand first, describing in quiet, devastating detail how Nathan had forced his way into her apartment, struck her unconscious, and taken Sophie. She spoke of the hours she had spent bound in that abandoned building, listening to Sophie cry for help, praying that someone would find them. He told Sophie her grandfather did not love her anymore, Grace said, her voice breaking. He told her that no one was coming to save her. He enjoyed watching her cry. The jury's faces hardened with every word. Then it was Melissa's turn. Melissa walked to the witness stand with her head held high. She had changed in the months since Sophie's rescue. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something stronger. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, her face pale but determined. When she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, her voice did not waver. Prosecutor Chen began gently, establishing the timeline of her relationship with Nathan Cole. Miss Bennett, can you describe how you first met the defendant? I met Nathan in 2012, when I was working at Seattle General Hospital. He was consulting on a case involving forged medical records. He seemed kind and understanding. He paid attention to me in ways no one else did. And when did the nature of your relationship change? Melissa's hands tightened in her lap. About 6 months in, I had relapsed, started using again. I owed money to some dangerous people. Nathan offered to help. He paid off my debts, got me into treatment. I thought he was saving my life, but he was not saving your life, was he? No. Her voice dropped. He was buying it. Over the next 2 hours, Melissa described the systematic abuse she had endured, the isolation from family and friends, the financial control that left her completely dependent on Nathan, the threats against her parents if she ever tried to leave, the broken fingers when she attempted to call her mother. The courtroom was silent as she spoke. Even the journalists had stopped writing, their faces frozen in horror. When I became pregnant with Sophie, I thought Nathan would change, Melissa continued. I thought having a child would make him see me as a partner instead of a possession. I was wrong. I was wrong. What happened when Sophie was born? Nathan wanted to use her. He said children were leverage. He talked about how valuable she would be, how we could use her to control people, to extract money. Melissa's voice cracked. I knew then that I had to get her away from him. I had to protect her. No matter what it cost me. She described the desperate plan she had devised with her grandmother, Margaret. The false identity for Sophie. The fake grave. The years of hiding while Nathan searched for them both. I gave up everything, Melissa said, tears streaming down her face. My family, my name, my entire life. Because I knew that if Nathan ever found Sophie, he would destroy her the way he destroyed me. Defense attorney Hayes rose for cross-examination, her tone dripping with false sympathy. Miss Bennett, you have described my client as a monster. But is it not true that you willingly participated in identity fraud? That you stole from your own father? That you abandoned your newborn daughter? Everything I did because Nathan forced me to. Forced you? Were you physically restrained? Were you locked in a room? I was locked in fear, Melissa replied quietly. Nathan did not need chains to control me. He had already broken me from the inside. Hayes pressed on, but Melissa remained steady. For every accusation, she had an answer. For every attempt to twist her words, she provided context. By the end of the cross-examination, Even the defense attorney seemed to realize she was losing. Then it was my turn. I approached the witness stand slowly, my injuries from the rescue still aching with every step. The courtroom felt enormous, every eye fixed on me as I settled into the chair. Mr. Bennett, Prosecutor Chen began, can you describe the moment you first suspected that Diana Ross was actually your daughter Melissa? It was her eyes, I said. My daughter has very distinctive green eyes, the same eyes my granddaughter Sophie inherited. The first time Diana visited my home, I saw those eyes, and something inside me knew. I told the jury everything. The photographs on the false grave, the letters from Margaret, the stolen money and forged signatures, the frantic race to the meatpacking plant and the confrontation with Nathan Cole. When I entered that building, I said, I was terrified. Not for myself. At 70 years old, I have lived a full life. But the thought of losing Sophie, of letting that monster take my granddaughter the way he had taken my daughter, that fear gave me strength I did not know I had. And what happened when you confronted the defendant? He pointed a gun at us. He said he was going to kill everyone who knew about his operation. I met Nathan's eyes across the courtroom, but my daughter was braver than he expected. She took control of the situation. She protected her child, the way she had been trying to protect her for 8 years. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. We gathered in the courtroom as Judge Whitman called for the verdict to be read. Nathan sat motionless at the defense table, his face still a mask of careful blankness, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the slight tremor in his hands. The jury foreman rose. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. On the charge of extortion, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of identity fraud, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. Nathan's mask finally cracked. For just a moment, I saw the fear beneath, the realization that his carefully constructed life was collapsing around him. Judge Whitman scheduled sentencing for the following month. When the day arrived, the courtroom was once again packed. Nathan stood before the bench, his attorney beside him, as Judge Whitman delivered her decision. Nathan Andrew Cole, you have been found guilty of crimes that destroyed lives and shattered families. You preyed on the vulnerable. You manipulated and controlled. You showed no remorse and no mercy. She looked down at him with cold contempt. It is the judgment of this court that you be sentenced to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court has none. The gavel fell. Nathan was led away in handcuffs, and I finally allowed myself to breathe. It was over. Spring arrived in Portland like a promise. The cherry blossoms bloomed along the streets of Eastmoreland, their pink petals drifting through the air like confetti. The old Victorian house that had felt so empty for so many years was finally full of life again, full of laughter, full of love. Sophie had moved in with me 3 weeks after Nathan's sentencing. The custody arrangement had been complicated. Melissa was still facing potential charges for identity fraud and theft. And though the prosecutor had shown leniency given her circumstances, she was required to complete a rehabilitation program and community service before she could regain full parental rights. In the meantime, I had petitioned the court for temporary guardianship. Grace had supported the request, testifying that Sophie had formed a deep bond with me and that stability was essential for her recovery from the trauma of the kidnapping. Judge Morrison, who had handled the family court proceedings, had agreed. Mr. Bennett, she had said, looking at me over her reading glasses, it is clear that you love this child and that she loves you. The court grants temporary guardianship, with the expectation that this arrangement will transition to shared custody with Miss Bennett once she has completed the terms of her agreement. Sophie had been sitting beside me when the decision was announced. She had grabbed my hand and squeezed it tight. Does this mean I get to live with Grandpa Richard? She had asked. Yes, sweetheart. For now. Forever and ever? I had looked at Melissa, who sat across the courtroom, tears streaming down her face but a smile on her lips. Forever and ever. I had promised. The adjustment had not been easy. Sophie still had nightmares about the meatpacking plant, about the bad man who had taken her from Grandma Grace. Some nights she would wake up screaming, and I would hold her until the trembling stopped, whispering that she was safe, that no one would ever hurt her again. We started seeing a child psychologist, a gentle woman named Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, who specialized in trauma recovery. Sophie liked her immediately, especially when Dr. Okonkwo introduced art therapy into their sessions. She is processing her experiences through creativity. Dr. Okonkwo explained to me after one session. The drawings she makes may be disturbing sometimes, but they are helping her externalize her fears. It is a healthy sign. Sophie's drawings covered the refrigerator now. Houses with big windows. Flowers in every color. A family of stick figures holding hands, labeled in her careful handwriting. Grandpa Richard, Mommy, Sophie, Grandma Grace. Melissa visited 3 times a week. The court had granted her supervised visitation while she completed her program, and Grace usually served as the supervisor. The 3 of them would spend hours in the garden, planting flowers or chasing butterflies, while I watched from the kitchen window with a heart so full it ached. My daughter was learning to be a mother. It was not easy for her either. Melissa carried guilt like a physical weight, blaming herself for the years she had missed, for the trauma Sophie had endured, for the choices that had led them all to this point. How can she ever forgive me? Melissa asked one evening as we sat together on the porch watching the sunset. I was not there for her first word, her first steps, her first day of school. You were protecting her, I said. Every decision you made out of love. Sophie knows that. Children are more perceptive than we give them credit for. But what if she grows up and realizes what I did? What if she hates me? I reached over and took my daughter's hand, the way I had when she was small and frightened of the dark. Then we will face it together. That is what families do. Grace remained a constant presence in our lives. She had moved into the guest cottage behind the main house, a small but comfortable space that Eleanor had once used as an art studio. It made sense for her to be close, both for Sophie's sake and for her own recovery. The kidnapping had taken a toll on Grace as well. She rarely spoke about those hours in the meatpacking plant, but I saw the shadows in her eyes, the way she flinched at unexpected noises. She had started seeing her own therapist, working through the trauma in her own way. Margaret would be proud of you, I told her one morning, as we shared coffee in the kitchen while Sophie ate her breakfast. She trusted you with the most precious thing in the world, and you did not let her down. Grace smiled, though her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I think about her every day, about whether I made the right choices, about whether she would have done things differently. She would have done exactly what you did. She would have loved Sophie with her whole heart and protected her with everything she had. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. You are part of this family now, Grace, not because of obligation or circumstance. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you, Richard, for everything. At the other end of the table, Sophie looked up from her cereal. Are you and Grandma Grace going to get married? She asked innocently. Grace and I exchanged startled glances, then burst into laughter. We are just good friends, sweetheart, I said, my cheeks warming. Sophie shrugged and returned to her breakfast. Okay, but if you do get married, can I be the flower girl? Some questions, I decided, were better left unanswered. Summer brought changes I had not anticipated. Melissa completed her rehabilitation program in June, earning praise from her counselors for her dedication and progress. The prosecutor, true to his word, had declined to file charges against her, citing her cooperation with the investigation and her status as a victim of Nathan Cole's abuse. You have been given a second chance, Miss Bennett, he had told her at their final meeting. Use it wisely. She intended to. Melissa found a job at a community health clinic in Southeast Portland, working as a nurse practitioner for underserved families. The pay was modest, But she did not care about money anymore. She cared about helping people who had nowhere else to turn. People who reminded her of the desperate, frightened woman she had once been. "I cannot undo the past," she told me one evening, as we sat on the porch watching Sophie catch fireflies in the garden. "But I can make sure my future means something. I can make sure Sophie grows up knowing that her mother did good in the world." The court modified the custody arrangement in July. Melissa was granted shared custody, with Sophie spending weekdays with me and weekends with her mother. It was an imperfect solution, but it was working. Sophie seemed to thrive with both of us in her life, two halves of a whole that had been fractured for far too long. Grace remained in the guest cottage, and her presence became as natural as the cherry trees in the yard. She helped Sophie with homework, drove her to school when I had medical appointments, and filled the house with the smell of her grandmother's recipes. I found myself looking forward to our morning coffees, our evening conversations on the porch, the easy companionship that had developed between us. Eleanor had been gone for 2 years now, and I did not expect to ever love someone the way I had loved her. But Grace offered something different, something quieter, a partnership built on shared loss and mutual respect. One night in August, as we cleaned up after Sophie's 8th birthday party, Grace paused with a dish towel in her hands. "Richard, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever think about what comes next? After all of this is settled, I mean, after Sophie is grown and Melissa is fully back on her feet." I considered the question carefully. For so long, my life had been defined by grief and waiting. Waiting for Eleanor to recover from her depression after Melissa's death. Waiting for my own heart to stop aching. Waiting for something to give meaning to the empty years stretching before me. Then Sophie had appeared in the cemetery, and everything had changed. "I think about the present," I said finally. "I think about making the most of whatever time I have left. And I think about making sure the people I love are taken care of, no matter what happens to me." Grace nodded slowly, as if my answer had confirmed something she had suspected. That is a good way to live. The next week, I called my attorney. David Fitzgerald had handled my legal affairs for over 30 years. He had drafted the original will that left everything to Eleanor, then revised it after her death to establish a charitable foundation in her name. Now I needed him to revise it again. "I want to create a trust for Sophie," I explained, sitting across from him in his oak-paneled office. "Something that will ensure her education, her health care." "That is straightforward enough," David said, making notes. "What about your daughter? Do you want to include provisions for Melissa?" I thought about my daughter, about the years she had lost, the suffering she had endured. She had never asked me for money, had never expected to inherit anything after the way she had left. But she was still my child. Yes. Create a separate trust for Melissa, to be accessed when she turns 50 or in the event of a medical emergency. I want her to have security. But I also want her to know that she has to build her own life first. David nodded approvingly. "And the rest of the estate? Divide it 3 ways. 1/3 to the Eleanor Chen Bennett Foundation for Medical Research. 1/3 to a new fund I want to establish, the Margaret Chen Family Protection Fund, to help victims of domestic abuse and trafficking rebuild their lives. And 1/3 to Grace Chen, for her years of service to our family and her ongoing care of Sophie." David looked up from his notes. "That is quite generous to Miss Chen. She gave up 8 years of her life to protect my granddaughter. She nearly died in that warehouse. There is no amount of money that could repay what she has done." I paused. "But I can try." The new will was signed and notarized the following week. I did not tell anyone about the changes I had made. It was not about recognition or gratitude. It was about ensuring that the people I loved would be protected when I was no longer there to protect them. That night, I sat in Eleanor's chair and looked at the photographs on the mantel. Eleanor, on our wedding day, young and radiant. Melissa, as a baby, then a child, then a troubled teenager. And now, in a new silver frame, a photograph from Sophie's birthday party. 3 generations of my family, smiling at the camera. I had lost so much, but I had found so much more. And for the first time in years, I was not afraid of what came next. 1 year later, I woke on the morning of my 71st birthday to the sound of small feet running up the stairs. "Grandpa Richard! Grandpa Richard! Wake up!" Sophie burst through the bedroom door, her dark hair flying behind her, her green eyes bright with excitement. She launched herself onto the bed with the fearless abandon of an 8-year-old, landing on my chest with enough force to knock the breath from my lungs. "Happy birthday, Grandpa. We made you breakfast." I laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Me and Mommy and Grandma Grace. Come on. You have to come downstairs before the pancakes get cold." She grabbed my hand and tugged me out of bed, barely giving me time to find my slippers before dragging me toward the stairs. The old Victorian house was filled with the smell of coffee and bacon and something sweet, maple syrup perhaps, wafting up from the kitchen. The dining room had been transformed. Pink and purple streamers hung from the chandelier. Balloons clustered in every corner. A hand-painted banner stretched across the window, reading, "Happy 71st birthday, Grandpa Richard," in Sophie's careful, colorful letters. Melissa stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease. Grace was setting the table, arranging plates and silverware with the precision of a woman who had spent decades caring for others. When they saw me in the doorway, both of them smiled. "Happy birthday, Dad," Melissa said, crossing the room to kiss my cheek. "Happy birthday, Richard," Grace added, squeezing my hand. I looked around at the 3 faces that had become my entire world, and my eyes filled with tears. "This is too much," I managed. "You did not have to go to all this trouble." "It is not trouble," Sophie declared, pulling out my chair and patting the seat. "It is what families do. You told me that. Remember? When I was sad about not having a birthday party before, I remembered. Last year, shortly after Sophie had moved in, she had confessed that she had never had a real birthday party. Grace had always done something small, a cake and a few presents, but Sophie had never experienced the chaos and joy of a proper celebration with family and friends. We had rectified that immediately. Her 8th birthday party had been legendary, at least by our standards. Balloons and streamers, and a bouncy castle in the backyard. 15 of her classmates running around screaming with sugar-fueled energy. A 3-tier cake shaped like a unicorn, which Sophie had declared the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Now she wanted to give me the same gift. "Sit down, Grandpa," she ordered, pointing at my chair. "You are not allowed to do anything today, except eat pancakes and open presents." "Yes, ma'am," I said, settling into my seat. Breakfast was a loud, chaotic affair. Sophie chattered endlessly about school, about her best friend Emma, about the art project she was working on. Melissa talked about her patients at the clinic, the families she was helping, the small victories that made her work meaningful. Grace described her plans for the garden, the vegetables she wanted to plant in the spring, the bird feeder she had ordered online. I listened to all of it, absorbing their voices like sunlight after a long winter. 1 year ago, I had been a lonely old man, mourning a daughter I thought was dead, living in a house full of ghosts. Now I sat at a table surrounded by love, by life, by the family I had thought I lost forever. After breakfast came the presents. Sophie had drawn me a portrait, her artistic skills improving rapidly under Dr. Okonkwo's guidance. It showed me sitting in Eleanor's chair, reading a book, with Sophie curled up at my feet and a cat I did not own, perched on the armrest. "The cat is for when you get one," Sophie explained seriously. "Every grandpa needs a cat. I will take that under advisement," I said, hugging her tight. Melissa gave me a framed photograph I had never seen before. It showed her as a baby, perhaps 6 months old, being held by a young woman with dark hair and kind eyes. "That is Grandma Eleanor," Melissa said quietly. "I found it in one of the boxes. I thought you might like to have it." I traced my finger over Eleanor's face, frozen forever in a moment of pure maternal joy. "Thank you," I whispered. "This is the best gift you could have given me." Grace's present was more practical. A new pair of gardening gloves, a set of hand tools, and a book on growing roses. "For when you are ready to learn," she said with a smile. Eleanor's rose garden deserves to bloom again. I looked out the window at the overgrown bushes that had once been Eleanor's pride and joy. For 2 years, I had not been able to bring myself to tend them. The sight of her roses, wilting and dying, had been too painful a reminder of everything I had lost. But now, looking at the 3 women who had become my family, I felt something shift inside me. It was time to let the roses bloom again. It was time to let myself bloom again. That afternoon, I asked Sophie if she would like to visit Grandma Eleanor's grave. She considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. Her small brow furrowed in thought. "Will it be sad?" she asked. "Maybe a little," I admitted. "But it will also be good. Grandma Eleanor would have loved you very much, Sophie. I think she would want to meet you, even if she can only do it this way." Sophie nodded slowly. "Okay, but can we bring her flowers? Mommy says you should always bring flowers when you visit someone you love." Quote, "We will bring her the most beautiful flowers we can find." We stopped at the florist on the way to Greenwood Memorial, the same shop where I had bought white roses every Sunday for 2 years. Sophie pressed her face against the glass display case, studying each arrangement with careful attention. "Those ones," she finally declared, pointing at a bouquet of mixed wildflowers. "They are happy flowers. Grandma Eleanor should have happy flowers." I could not argue with that logic. The cemetery was quiet in the late afternoon light. October had returned, and the trees were ablaze with color, their leaves drifting down like gentle rain. Sophie held my hand as we walked the familiar path, her small fingers warm against my weathered skin. Eleanor's grave looked different than I remembered. Someone had planted flowers around the headstone, bright yellow marigolds that swayed in the autumn breeze. A small stone angel sat beside the marker, its wings spread as if in blessing, and propped against the granite was a photograph in a weatherproof frame, showing Eleanor and me on our 40th wedding anniversary. "Mommy did it," Sophie whispered, noticing my surprise. "She wanted to make it pretty for Grandma Eleanor. She said Grandma Eleanor deserved to have visitors who cared." My throat tightened. Melissa had been here, my daughter, who had missed her mother's funeral, who had spent 8 years believing she could never come home, had found her way to Eleanor's grave and made it beautiful. Sophie knelt down and placed the wildflowers beside the marigolds. "Hello, Grandma Eleanor," she said, her voice clear and confident. "My name is Sophie. I am your granddaughter. I know we never got to meet, but Grandpa Richard tells me stories about you all the time." She paused, as if listening for a response. "He says you made the best chocolate chip cookies in Portland. He says you used to dance in the kitchen when you thought no one was watching. He says you loved your garden and your books and your family more than anything in the whole world." I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, unable to speak. "I wish I could have known you," Sophie continued. "I think we would have been friends. Grandpa Richard says I have your laugh. He says when I giggle, it sounds just like you." She reached out and traced the letters of Eleanor's name with her fingertip. "I promise I will take care of Grandpa Richard for you. I know he misses you a lot, but he has me now, and Mommy, and Grandma Grace. We are a family again. I think that would make you happy." She stood up and took my hand again. "Is that okay, Grandpa? What I said?" I knelt down, ignoring the protest of my aging knees, and pulled her into my arms. "That was perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." We stayed at the grave for a long time, watching the shadows lengthen across the grass. Sophie sat on the small stone bench nearby, humming a song I did not recognize, while I stood before Eleanor's headstone and spoke to my wife for the first time in months. "You should see her, Eleanor. She is everything we dreamed of. Smart and kind and brave, with a heart bigger than she knows what to do with. She reminds me of you, in so many ways. The way she tilts her head when she is thinking, the way she laughs at her own jokes, the way she loves without reservation or fear. I paused, watching a leaf drift down and settle on the grass. Melissa came home. I know you never stopped hoping, never stopped believing she was alive somewhere. You were right. You were always right. My voice cracked. I wish you could have seen her, Eleanor. I wish you could have held Sophie in your arms. But I think, somehow, I think you have been watching over all of us, guiding us back together. The wind stirred, rustling the leaves around me, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I smelled Eleanor's perfume. Lavender and rose, the scent she had worn every day of our marriage. I love you, I whispered. I will always love you. But I am learning to live again. I am learning to be happy again. And I think that is what you would want. Sophie appeared at my side, slipping her hand into mine. Are you ready to go home, Grandpa? I looked down at her. At this miraculous child, who had appeared in my life like a gift from heaven. Yes, sweetheart. Let us go home. We walked back to the car together. Grandfather and granddaughter, the October sun warm on our faces. Behind us, Eleanor's wildflowers swayed in the breeze, a splash of color against the gray granite. And somewhere, I was certain, Eleanor was smiling. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, I sat alone in Eleanor's chair. The house was quiet, filled with the peaceful silence that comes after a day well spent. Through the window, I could see the first stars appearing in the October sky, pinpricks of light against the gathering darkness. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked steadily, marking time the way it had for nearly a century. I was 71 years old. It seemed impossible. In my mind, I was still the young man who had married Eleanor Chen in a small church in Portland, who had held his newborn daughter for the first time, who had believed that life would unfold in predictable, manageable ways. That young man had not known about grief, about betrayal, about the 1,000 small deaths that accumulate over a lifetime. But he had not known about resurrection either. I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment. The Sunday morning, when a little girl with green eyes had approached me in a cemetery and asked why I was crying. The shock of discovering that my daughter was alive. That I had a granddaughter I never knew existed. The terror of the kidnapping, the triumph of the rescue. The slow, painful work of rebuilding a family from the ruins of the past. None of it had been easy. None of it had been what I expected, but all of it had been worth it. A soft knock at the study door interrupted my thoughts. Dad? Are you still awake? Melissa stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. She had changed out of her party clothes into comfortable jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. In the soft light, she looked like the little girl she had once been. Uncertain and seeking reassurance. Come in, I said. Sit with me. She settled into the chair across from mine, the same chair where Eleanor had spent countless evenings reading or knitting or simply watching me work. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I have been thinking, Melissa finally said, about everything that happened, about the choices I made, the people I hurt, the years I wasted running from my problems. You were not running from problems, I said gently. You were running for your life, maybe. But I was also running from you and Mom, from the shame of what I had become. She looked down at her hands. I told myself I was protecting you, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid you would look at me the way I looked at myself. With disgust, with disappointment. Melissa, let me finish. Please. When I came back to Portland, when I put on that Diana Ross disguise and walked into your house, I expected you to be old and bitter and closed off from the world. I expected you to be broken, the way I was broken. Instead, I found a man who was willing to fight for a granddaughter he had just met. A man who risked his life to save a family he thought he had lost forever. Her eyes met mine, shining with tears. You taught me something, Dad. You taught me that love does not give up, that family does not end, no matter how far we run or how long we stay away. You taught me that it is never too late to come home. I reached across the space between us and took her hand. Your mother used to say that family is not about blood. It is about the people who show up when you need them most. She showed up for me every day of our marriage, even when I did not deserve it. And when she was gone, I thought that kind of love was gone too. I squeezed her fingers gently. I was wrong. You came back. Sophie came into my life. Grace became part of our family. And suddenly, I had more love than I knew what to do with. I smiled through my own tears. You did not fail me, Melissa. You found your way back. That is all that matters. She stood and crossed to my chair, kneeling beside me the way she had when she was a child seeking comfort after a nightmare. I put my arm around her shoulders and held her close. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. Always. We stayed like that for a long time. Father and daughter, reunited after years of separation and pain. Outside, the stars wheeled slowly across the sky, indifferent to our small human dramas, but beautiful nonetheless. Later, after Melissa had gone to bed, she was asleep. Her dark hair spread across the pillow, her arms wrapped around the stuffed rabbit she had carried since infancy. The nightlight cast a soft glow across her face, peaceful and untroubled. The nightmares had become less frequent, the memories of the meatpacking plant fading into the background of a childhood filled with love and security. I stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. 1 year ago, I had not known she existed. 1 year ago, I had been a lonely old man, counting down the days until I could join my wife in whatever came next. I had not expected to find purpose again. I had not expected to find joy. But life, I had learned, was full of unexpected gifts. Sophie stirred in her sleep, mumbling something I could not quite hear. Then, her eyes fluttered open, and she saw me standing there. Grandpa Richard, I am here, sweetheart. Go back to sleep. She smiled, a drowsy, contented expression that filled my heart to overflowing. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Sophie. More than you will ever know. Her eyes closed again, and within moments, she was asleep. I stood there for a while longer. This old man, who had been given a second chance at life. Then I turned and walked back to my room, ready to sleep, ready to dream, ready to wake up tomorrow and do it all over again, because that was what family meant, showing up every single day, no matter what. And for the first time in years, I could not wait to see what tomorrow would bring.